If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey folks, good evening. Welcome to you all wherever you're listening from. My name is Kalu Aja. Welcome to another Money Space with me. On this space, we're talking money, we're talking the economy, we're talking personal finance. And this week, we have a great topic. Is Nigeria entering a debt trap, right? So just before we start, guys, just to make a statement. When we hold our spaces, I know most of you guys know me on Twitter, right? When we hold our spaces, we aim to inform, we aim to equip the listener with the facts only. Every time I have a space, remember I'm hosting a show, so I will ask questions to clarify, ask questions as a devil's advocate. It's all to give you that information. But we want to be totally unbiased. We want to have all voices heard. We want you to have the facts. Then you can have your own opinions, right? That's what we aim to do here. We want to give you the facts to enable you to become a better citizen. So it's a great topic this week. And of course, if you've been following this week, this topic has been triggered by the request by the President of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to borrow. If you converted what he wants to borrow to Naira, it's about 45 trillion. It's about $21 billion. There's some euros in there. There's also some yen in there. There's also some grants in there. But if you do the conversion of that figure that I want to borrow, it's going to give about 45 trillion. So let's set it up for you. Nigeria currently, I pulled up our debt, and I'm going to use the official numbers, right? So the official numbers go as far back as December 2024. I know we're in June, but this is the latest official numbers from the Debt Management Office. We're going to use those official numbers. We have, as at December 2024, a total external debt of about $45 billion. So it's actually 780 million if you want to count the actual figures. So about 45 billion United States dollars. That's what we have right now. If you look at last year, the number itself did not change that much. Last year we had about 42 billion. That was 2023, 42 billion. But if you just pick those numbers, you really wouldn't get the sense of really where the change is usually coming from, right? So what has made the foreign debt go up? Again, guys, I'm building a picture for you. Just follow. You get the picture I'm building for you. As at 2024, what went up was the Eurobonds. Eurobonds went up. Loans from the China Development Bank also went up. Their loans from the African Development Bank also went up. And of course, the bulk of the increase has come from the World Bank. Now, when you look at sovereign debt, it's very important that you separate the volume of the debt from the cost of the debt. The volume, separate that from the debt, from the cost. What I mean is this, right? In 2023, the total World Bank, let's say the total multilateral debt, which is like the World Bank, the African Development Bank, all Islamic Development Bank, all that sort of debt was about $21 billion, right? If you come to 2024, all that debt has gone up by $1 billion. So we're doing about $22 billion. And the bulk of that increase has come from the World Bank. Again, 2023, Nigeria was doing, give or take, about, if you just move the IMF, right, just from the World Bank, which is the IDA and the IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, we're about 400 million with them. But if you come to 2024, that has ballooned up to about 1.2. So from 485 million, we now owe the World Bank about 1.2. And this is as at December December 2024, we've taken more loans. We've taken about 500 million for empowerment. We've taken up under 500 million for nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So this is more than the 1.2. The bulk of the increase has been to the World Bank. If you guys have read the papers, you've seen Nigeria is borrowing from the World Bank and all that. The World Bank debts are really not a problem because the cost of that debt is very, very minute, like maybe 2%, and it's spread over a longer period, right? So even though the volume of that debt has gone up, the cost of the debt itself is still that 2%. You pay your commitment fee and all that. So not a lot going on there. Let's look at Eurobond. Eurobonds, Nigeria was at about 15 billion. Eurobonds constitute about 35% of our total debt, and we're about 15 billion as at December 2023. Where are we in December 2024? We've gone up, not down, up to 17 billion, and now it makes up 37% of our debt. Guys, this is what the problem is. Because Euro bonds are the bonds that the Wall Street gives to you and all that gives you. So it's our commercial loans. It's about anywhere from 7% to about 8% Nigeria is borrowing. Essentially, we're borrowing for 30 years, 10 years, 15, and we're going to pay these guys in dollars. There is no ABEG. This is not a development loan. It's a pure commercial loan. So the problem for Nigeria is this Eurobonds, which make up about 37% as at December 2024, right? So I also pulled up the total cost of the debt. So I pulled up how much we had in debt as at December 2024 and how much we used to service it. The average is about 10%. We're talking dollars now, not naira, dollars. So we are paying for Nigeria 10% dollars to anyone that owns our bonds. That's the average cost of our debt. If you add the World Bank, if you add everybody, it's about 10. So it's higher, but the average is about 10 if you take everything in. So is 10% a high cost? Yes, it is. It's a very, very high cost. Because when you borrow, you borrow LIBOR plus. There's no more LIBOR, but you borrow based on the London Interbank. It has a new name. The name escapes me. That's what you borrow based on. 10% is a very, very high return, because if you went to the United States today and you put money in their banks, they will pay you 1%. If you bought a US bond, you get about 3 or 4%. So that's a risk-free bond, right? Even though the rating has come down. If you buy a Nigerian bond, you're going to get 10%. So essentially, when you hear that Nigerian bonds were oversubscribed, what has happened is that the Americans are taking money from Japan, from America. Japan is 0%. You take money at 0%, you come to Nigeria and you buy federal government bonds or almost securities, and you make 6 to 10%. So look at the margin in dollars, not naira, dollar terms. Then you can go back and cover your risks and all that. So Nigeria is what we call it Father Christmas in terms of international yields. We're giving folks a lot of yield to borrow. So I've laid that picture for you. Let's come now to what's going on in Nigeria. The president wants to borrow about $21 billion, about 2 billion euros, and a few yens here and there. About, like I said, 45 trillion when you convert it to naira. What's the problem? It's too much debt. Remember what I said, the total debt Nigeria has as at December 2024, the latest figures we have, is 45. So the president wants to borrow 50%, about 50% of that debt. We don't know from where. So we don't know if it's going to be Eurobonds or if it's going to be development issue. We don't know. Till we know, we can do a deeper dive. Now, what's the problem? Clearly, you can tell that if you own the company and you are going to borrow that amount of money, your board will say, come on, let's slow down. What's the money going to be used for? How are we going to pay back? When we borrow in naira, which is what we've been doing with treasury bills, treasury bonds, savings bonds, we can print naira and pay back if all else fails. When you borrow money, it's like a tax increase. It's the same thing. Borrowing is faster than taxes. That's why governments like to borrow. But when you borrow and you increase taxes, it's the exact same thing. The citizens pay the citizens pay down the debt, and the citizens also pay taxes. There's no difference. So when you want to borrow 25 billion, right? Let's just call it $23 billion or 45 trillion. Essentially, what you're doing is that you are increasing taxes by 45 trillion naira. So you see, it's easier to borrow than to increase taxes because the citizens do not understand it's a tax. They think it's borrowing that they will not pay. No. The government doesn't pay back loans. Citizens pay back loans. Same way the government taxes you. You pay the tax. There's nobody called government. There's only someone called citizen. So if you go back now, we want to borrow the 45 trillion. What do we want to use it for? We don't know. We haven't been told. What has been the response of the government? The government has said, no, hold on. We're not borrowing 45 trillion. We're not borrowing 23 billion. We are simply saying we want to have the capacity to borrow. That if you look at something called the medium-term expenditure framework or the whatever it's called, right? That you will see this borrowing there. It just means that we are planning to borrow. Okay. So I went to the medium-term expenditure framework to take a look at it and see what it's in that framework. In that framework, what it is, again, to give you history, in the past, I think it was under Obasanjo's regime, he was fighting a lot with the legislators. There were a lot of fights. And they said he would just come every year, a new budget would come there, and there would be a new surprise. Either they want to do benchmark price, or they want to borrow, or they want to pay back. So it's like, give us an elongated plan, an elongated fiscal plan. To say, if you want to borrow, break it down, let's show what we want to do in the next 2-3 years. So in summary, that's how we got the medium-term expenditure framework. So the government just can't wake up in a budget cycle and say we want to borrow 100 billion. It has to plan that out and say, okay, in the next 3 years, we're going to borrow 100 billion, we'll borrow 30, we'll borrow 30, we'll borrow 30. Okay, that's fantastic. But if you then look at the medium-term expenditure framework for 2025, the total amount that Nigeria wants to borrow is about 8 trillion. 8, 1, 2, 3. But right now, we're asking for permission to borrow 45 trillion. So it doesn't add up. Even if you take rounding error, even if you take inflation, it's just simply too much to borrow. It's just too much. Even if you add up 2025 and 2026, it's still not up to 15 billion trillion. It's still not up to 15 trillion. If you add both years, it's still not 15 trillion. So why is there a big disparity? Simple. The exchange rate in the medium-term expenditure framework, sorry, lots of information, but just try to follow, is less than $700. So Nigeria had written to the legislators in 2024 and said, we're going to borrow 8 trillion and we are going to use less than $700 to 1 naira. 700 naira to $1. So now dollar is about 1600. So clearly the entire medium-term expenditure framework no longer can stand under any scrutiny. It's outdated. It's got $700 in that space. It's actually $699, but it's outdated. We're now at 1500, 1600 to $1. That's number one. Inflation, everything is off the charts. So what should the government do when you want to borrow money according to your plan in 2024? But in 2025, your currency has depreciated, your inflation has gone up, and you can no longer borrow. Same way, if I ask you a question, let's say you plan to buy 2 Rolls-Royce in 2024 because you were expecting to earn dollars. And then 2025 came. The dollars you were expecting to earn no longer came. What would you do? Would you go and borrow money to buy 2 Rolls-Royce? Or would you say, okay, I'm going to go and buy Toyota? I don't have money for Rolls-Royce anymore. I'll simply buy a Toyota. In Nigeria said, we're not only going to buy the 2 Rolls-Royce, we're going to add 2 more Rolls-Royce. We're going to buy 4 brand new Rolls-Royce. And how are we going to fund this 4 brand new Rolls-Royce? We're going to borrow the money. That's what's going on here, guys. So let me give you my last start. I see some guys want to speak already, and I'll let you guys to speak and come back on me, right? This is my last start. Let's look at actuals now, because I've given you 2024, I've given you 2023 projection. So let's go back to a time when Nigeria actually spent money and borrowed money and see What was the result? Let's compare with oil prices and then see what we can tell from that. So I pulled up 2023. This is the actual now. Actual. In 2023, Nigeria said we were going to spend that the oil price, right, we're going to borrow was about $75 a barrel. Just that's what they said, that oil price is not just let me make it easier for you. In 2023, forget what they said. In 2023, the oil price on average was $81. So 2023 followed, the oil price on average was $81. What was Nigeria's output? Nigeria's output was 1.3 million barrels per day. What's our output today? About 1.4, 1.5. What's oil price today? About 65. So remember, in 2023, the average oil price was $81 with an output of 1.33. Okay, with these numbers, what do you think was the total revenue? No deductions, none, that Nigeria made from crude oil. No deductions. What's the total amount of money Nigeria made from crude oil when the oil price was $81 a barrel and output was 1.33? Guys, we made about 5.5 trillion. No deductions. So we've not paid 50% to Shell and the joint venture guys. Just the total cash that came in is 5.5 trillion. It's not a lot of money. The point I'm making is all these projections of 45 trillion borrowing is based on selling oil at $75 and 2 million barrels. But I'm showing you guys that in 2023, when we actually sold 1.3 million barrels a day at $81, we got less than 6 trillion. We got less than 6 trillion, which is less than what's in the medium term framework for 2025, which is, if you take 6 trillion multiplied by 45, this is almost 5 or 6 times what we want to borrow or what we want to get the license to borrow. Doesn't make any sense. The government can't tell Nigerians, you don't understand what we're doing. We're not going to borrow $22 billion. If you're not going to borrow it, why did you write a letter to the assembly and get it read? You write to the assembly to get permission to spend money. That's why the president wrote a letter to get permission to borrow and spend. Because only the National Assembly can give the president the powers to borrow and spend. Remember, Buhari printed 23 trillion without permission from National Assembly. What happened? In the end, he had to go back to National Assembly and get that borrowing, the ways and means, converted to a bond, which sits in our bond base today. That's why we're at 45 billion, because we've converted Buhari's printing ways and means to debt, bonds, which you and I and our kids are going to pay. So if you're not going to borrow, why are you writing to the National Assembly? It doesn't pass the single test. I've given you guys too much data. Let me hear you guys talk. After all, you've got the floor, sir. I've tried to, there's a lot I could say on this. I don't want to just flood the space with numbers. But what's your take on what's going on? Are we in the death trap?
Hi, Caleb, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to get to it, it's you kind of covered that into the picture. I think I'll just go straight to your question. Most people assume we are approaching the death trap, if not very close. I personally think we're already there, and I'll give you just a quick reason. 2024, ending of 2024, our debt servicing percentage of the federal budget that was used for debt servicing was around 28.7%, almost 29% of the approximately. Generally speaking, you are getting towards the debt trap when you are getting above 45%. That's you're getting you're the 45%, 50%, you're in a debt trap. Now, but that was at $73 a barrel at the time. This is before all the, at least in the last 6 months, the World Bank requests have come in, the dollar bond, and the rest. So I assume, I guess when the official figures, we are already above that 29% as far as the percentage of the budget is used for debt servicing. So already close. But in this whole discussion, most people don't factor NNPC a standing debt of 153 trillion currently. And that is official. Unofficially, with its investigations, it's suspected to be more because NNPC had done a series of deals. They have multiple subsidiaries scattered across the globe. Their internal operations since Kerry left Kerry is highly suspected to be much larger than what they stated. And it's not mutually exclusive because NNPC's debt directly affects the ability to contribute to the federal budget. The oil and gas is still the primary base for our revenue. So if we are already close, just looking at Nigeria's current debt standing, the percentage of the service debt already there, and factoring in NNPC, from my perspective, we're well in the debt trap. It's just, the oil price is the ticker. Because if geopolitics settles down a bit, let's assume things don't get worst case scenario, oil is only going to continue to go down. Unless Israel bombs Iran tomorrow, that might spike things up. But oil is we're not going to get to the $80, $75, or very unlikely. And it's not and if we do, it won't be sustained. So it's just to answer the question, I think we're either already there and the metrics just have to catch up, or we're very close. And this latest request would, if it's, well, I don't expect with rubber stamp Senate that there will be any pushback. But this latest request, more than likely, that would be the tipping point.
Yeah, because
so that's, we can go into other aspects of it, but just to answer your question, I think we are very close or already there.
And folks, someone's asking me, what is a debt trap? That he understands what is it in number terms. So let me give you a good explanation for debt trap. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, when she was the Minister of Finance, when she negotiated the Paris debt, I believe, she was saying that the actual amount that was borrowed by Nigeria was about 5 billion. The total amount that was actually borrowed was about 5 or 7 billion. But what we owed them was 44 billion. So what's the difference? Interest on interest, negative amortization, fines that are capitalized. So when you have a debt that it is impossible to get out of because the cost of servicing that debt, it's just you can only service the debt. I mean, you can just pay the interest, but you can't pay the principal. That's a debt trap. So you see it most times when you have this what they call payday loans. Maybe you earn 100 naira, then someone says, I will give you an advance on your salary, but you will give me your salary when it comes. You say, okay. So the guy gives you 50 naira, but they're charging you 50%. So in essence, when you get your next paycheck, he takes $50, 50 naira from your paycheck. How do you survive? You go back to him and say, I want to borrow on that 50 naira. He gives you, now you are owing him 150, you give him 75. You can never pay him his principal. You are just refinancing that loan to survive. So you see, Nigeria has debt servicing as our number one expense item. What we pay to service debt is more than what we pay for education, defense combined. That's the point. You can't get out of it. You are making money for Wall Street. That's what Afripol is saying. If NNPC is at what number was that? 119 trillion?
153.
153 trillion has already been logged in by NNPC. This is an off-balance sheet, or in Nigeria we call it an off-FARC debt. When NNPC owes money, what it means to you is that they don't contribute money to FARC. So you are paying, you are subsidizing NNPC because NNPC should pay money to FARC. The government takes that FARC and does your roads. But in this sense, NNPC is not contributing 153 to FARC, so you are paying in taxes. That's what's going on. So when you then add this to 45 trillion, and remember, this is in dollars. NNPC is borrowing in dollars. We're borrowing in dollars. How do you pay back? I just give you guys the figures. When oil prices were at 81 or so, we only earned 5 trillion. It's not a lot of money. This oil is not a lot of money. We have too many people in Nigeria, and we share 40 or 60% to the oil majors. So, Alfred, thanks for that background. Let me see you in. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add to it. Another major concern is that the NNPC's loans are not as transparent as the federal government. The terms of NNPC's loans are not entirely public, which is something a major concern. And again, just a reminder, that 153, 156 is the best. That is what is publicly known. But there is suspicion that it's significant. Maybe not significant, but it might be higher than that.
And they are doing forward sales. So NNPC sells oil, the money goes to the lender. The lender takes his payment and then sends NNPC the balance. So what you might see is that we might sell oil and not make any money. You know, remember I said for the last 2 or 3 years, NNPC had not done any remittance to the CBN. Even JP Morgan wrote that famous research report where they said Nigeria was the only oil exporting nation, only, that had not taken advantage of the rise in oil prices, because JP Morgan keeps oil sales for most of the oil countries on earth, right? So they said Nigeria was the only country on earth that oil prices had gone up and we had not increased our revenues, i.e. the payments that were coming to JP Morgan. This was going to happen. So even if oil prices go up or down, if you are paying too much basic, it's not going to come to FARC. If money doesn't come to FARC, your naira is going to fall. It's math. Your naira is a derivative of Brent crude oil. Your naira, if Brent crude goes up, naira goes up. So if you keep on borrowing in dollars, you are taking more of that naira to attach to that Brent crude, leaving the naira no support. So these things are connected. You can't remember it's a tax increase. When you borrow, it's a tax increase. See you. What's on your mind, sir? You've heard of what was talking about. What you think?
Thank you, Kalu, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Once again, your insights are very informative, and Africa, but also like what you talked about as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can clearly.
Okay, so I want to come from this your position in a more balanced view, because I look at the negatives, I look at the positives. So first of all, I want to remind people that we should remember that debt deficits are not bad things. If you look at the periods from 1997 to 2007, most of the G7 ran economies ran large budget deficits. Why is that so? Because during that period, if you look at the business cycle, we were in a bust period. And every time a country is in a bust period, you're going to see that government needs to boost aggregate demand, so that by boosting aggregate demand, you see that deficit spending goes up. Now, the issue with Nigeria and talking about this whole thing is, when I say that debts and deficits aren't really a bad thing, you have to look at it from 3 ways. An economic machine is driven by 3 main facts. Population growth. Nigeria is at 230 million. What we call productivity growth, and also leverage, what we also call government spending, government expenditure. Now, the issue is that if you use productivity growth in an economy, you're generally going to see that you can increase GDP growth, but at a slower pace. Now, why most countries in the globe, and mostly Nigeria, are addicted to this leverage spending is because you are able to reach, you're able to hit economic growth at a much faster pace. But the issue with this long-term spending is that if you keep borrowing and you keep on financing things that lead to overconsumption rather than productivity. So, for example, look at Nigeria's wasteful government spending in the past, the NADCC projects, the financing of the aircrafts and fleets and all these kind of things. That is financing via deficit spending overconsumption on things that do not yield growth in the economy. Now, my concern in Nigeria's fiscal position and debt sustainability, if you look at our government budget deficit to GDP, it actually slowed on that from 5.4 to 3.5%, and it actually has forecasted by the World Bank expected to stay within 3%, 3.5% over the next few years. Debt to GDP has also come down as well. While this is good, I also want to mention that any economy that is in a budget deficit, you have to be able to use what we call debt sustainability rule. So in the debt sustainability rule, you're saying that primary surplus to GDP, equals to public sector debt to GDP. You multiply your interest rates on debts, or your interest rate on your debts might multiply by a real economic growth rate. Now, the issue with Nigeria is that or any other economy, if you're running budget deficits, you need to have to run a primary surplus. That's what brings debt to GDP down. What Nigeria is trying to do is to borrow so that, I don't know, maybe they want to borrow money to, maybe increase productivity growth. But you can only do that when your real economic growth rate is greater than your real interest rate of your economy. That is the problem that Nigeria has. Now, the last thing I want to mention before I give it back to you is that, what Nigeria needs to do is that they have to go through a deleveraging phase. And in the deleveraging phase, there are things we have to look at, such as debt restructuring, such as what we're seeing in Ghana and Zambia, or the cutting of wasteful spending. So, for example, you guys talked a lot about that fiscal forecast. Yes, we budgeted $75 per barrel, 2 million barrels a day, and oil right now is trending in the mid-60s. And I don't see oil even going anywhere because of OPEC's massive oversupply and Trump's drill baby drill, economic policy to allow U.S. drillers to pump more shale. So I don't see oil going anywhere. And what this does is that it risks widening our fiscal deficit. So I also see that we need to have very conservative fiscal forecasts. And also, another thing that you talked about is, the Brent crude correlation with our currency. Now, I believe I've always said this, that Nigeria needs to diversify our export revenue. Currently, export revenue makes up about more than 80% of this. And what we need to do is increase more supply-side policies, deregulation, and allowing the ruins of our capitalism flow. Because once you do that, you allow other sectors to come, and that competes with export revenue, so that we are not dependent on this boom-bust cycle of commodity prices. Nigeria is a commodity-backed economy, and if you're a commodity-backed economy, you're going to see very high fiscal deficit. For example, even look at Ghana as well. Ghana, known as cocoa producers, which is tied to their currency. I just read recently that they're exporting more gold exports, and that's going to bring in 12 billion. And their potential mining output is going to reach about more than 40%. So that's just something I'm saying we can mirror. Is this something we can do now? Not sure, but long term, I think we should look at that.
Yeah, I think some great points.
And also, the last thing I just want to say, because I'm not speaking again after this, I just want to say this need for debt sustainability is paramount across the global economy. In the US, we're already looking at, everybody's complaining about the deficit, TCJA, and that is why you're seeing that, the Trump tariffs are there to not only bring manufacturing, but they want to bring down the deficits. Because, in my opinion, if you're not in a war, if you're not in a recession, if you do not have financial system stress, you should not run a budget deficit more than 6%. Nigeria brought theirs to 3% under Tinubu, but then again, like I said, in the debt sustainability rule, you have to run a primary surplus so that you bring your debt to GDP down. So that's what I'll say.
I mean, great point. What do you mean you're not talking again? Please hang up, don't go anywhere. So I have this So just let's say this right. So thank you for making that point that deficits are not bad. As a matter of fact, you cannot point to any major economy on earth that has not borrowed to grow. Borrowing, even if you are making record revenues do not come at consistent pace, but your expenses are consistent. So you must borrow to cover that, back and forth, and also to invest in infrastructure, which you pay. So thanks for making that point that we're not against debt, we're not against borrowing. You must borrow in Nigeria's case to bridge that infrastructure gap. There's no problem with that. I think let's highlight this now. If the government came to us and said, we want to borrow $1 trillion, We want to use that $1 trillion to connect all states with a 10-lane expressway, high-speed rail, and want to put Starlinks in every community in Nigeria. We also want to build dams and connect all the rivers so you can sail from Sokoto to that delta. I don't think you will get anybody saying what you'll be hearing is project management, capacity, but you won't hear anyone talking about debt sustainability, because most Nigerians understand that even when you want to buy a house, you go to the bank and you borrow to buy a house, and that's a good debt. The problem is that Nigeria is borrowing for not consumption is good. We're borrowing for recurring expenditures that add nothing to the treasury. If you look at what we are borrowing money from the World Bank at, like I was deliberate when I said for nutritional support. Just pull up World Bank's loans to Nigeria. Let me give you the one that riles me up. Nigeria is borrowing in dollars to give naira to poor people. Say it again. Nigeria is borrowing in dollars to give naira to poor people. Will the poor people pay back? No. So down the line, Nigeria is going to pay that loan back in dollars, but we gave it out in naira. So essentially, we're supposed to use our internal taxes to give naira or borrow in naira and give out naira. Nothing wrong with the social scheme. People are poor, give them money. That's fine, social welfare. But to go to the World Bank and borrow, they would argue, it's very, very low interest rates. But why are you borrowing in dollars for that? That's what's making the World Bank side go up. This is the problem, where we borrow for salaries, we call it budget support. And if you do that, you create that fiscal hole in the future that you have no revenue to pay back on. That's the problem. This 22 billion we're going to borrow, what's it going to be used for? No one has told us. They've simply told us we're not borrowing that money in a year or two. But when you do eventually borrow it, what are you going to use it for? No one, and that's the first red flag you can see flashing. That's the red flag. That's why we're having this space. We've held this same topic on this space 2 or 3 times now about debt and debt sustainability and borrowing. You've got to be transparent with the taxpayers. You cannot come to Nigeria and say, Nigerians, we want to borrow 45 trillion. Listen, Buhari printed 23 trillion. The cost in a quarter of that borrowing was 1 trillion. That's what they were paying CBN before they converted it to a bond, was 1 trillion. So the interest we were paying to the CBN was more than what Nigeria, the federal government was making from crude oil and gas. And that was just 22 trillion. Now we're talking of 45 trillion. Who is going to pay it back? The economy is at a spot where there are no SMEs creating jobs because interest rates are very, very high. Inflation is very, very high. We just lost the bridge in Mokwa. So food is going to go up, which means inflation is going to go up. I don't know what's happening, right? So I saw a guy on Twitter celebrating that the federal government, through Sukuk, borrowed money at 19%, and it was oversubscribed 7 times. That's actually a red flag. It's telling you that Nigerians are no longer taking risk. Nobody wants to invest in a business anymore. So everybody is running for safety of the federal government and are willing to take 19%, even when inflation is 23%, rebased. It was 33%, rebased to 23%. So Nigerians are telling the government that, listen, the environment we find ourselves in Nigeria is so bad that we are willing to take 19% than take a risk and start a business. You don't celebrate that. There's nothing to celebrate that. Look at America. Their yields are going up to 5%. They are shaking. It's a big problem that their yields are going to 5%. They want it to come down. You don't celebrate high yields. You don't celebrate oversubscription based on high yields. A few months ago, Nigeria did a Eurobond. It was oversubscribed. People came on Twitter to celebrate and yes, you celebrate that there's confidence in Nigeria. But people are only investing because you are paying them 7, 6, 10% on a dollar base. That's why they're investing. You don't. It doesn't call. So see you. Let me give it back to you, just in case you had. I just want to clarify that point you made about the borrowing is not the issue, but what we're borrowing for.
Yes. Like I said, the borrowing is not the issue. It's just what we're borrowing using these I would say them deficits, because it's deficit spending.
Yeah.
What we're using this to do in terms of productivity growth. Because let me tell you, if borrowing keeps up at this level, you're going to see that, and Nigeria's productivity growth isn't at a very sustainable level. You're going to see that our debts will rise faster than our income, and if your debt rises faster than income, I'm sorry, you are screwed, because you are going to be spending more on interest payments over supply side policies. That is why I even think I agree that we are, if not in the debt trap. The only way we get out of this is you can borrow money, fine and good, but you need to make sure that the productivity side is efficiently covered. We don't have productivity growth in a population of 230 million. If you say this in Europe, people will call you, they will say, what, you're crazy. In Europe, for example, people are complaining about low birth rates. If you have low birth rates, you don't have the sufficient productivity growth to run economy. We have a bulging population growth of 230 million people, and yet productivity growth is low, and yet the government is borrowing. It doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. You can borrow money. China did it. That is why they were having double-digit GDP growth from when the year they entered the WTO. So when they started having this real estate crisis, you can borrow money and you can grow your economy with productivity. That is my main issue. Mm-hmm. And also the NNPC thing as well. I think it's stupid in terms of our the way we forecasted our budget. The way we forecasted it in terms of $75 per barrel. Oil is not going up. I bet you oil is not going to go past. It's not going to go past $75 in this current economic climate. Because even if you say, Goldman said a few days ago that they believe that the best hedge for your portfolio is to have gold and oil. Yes, you can have gold, but oil to have gold and oil. But if you have oil in your portfolio, I'm sorry, it also brings down some kind of capital returns, because oil is not going to go up. Even if Israel we have this Middle East crisis, because of the oversupply and because OPEC Plus are increasing, the 411,000 barrel produced I don't know when they said they were going to do, but that's what they projected. You're going to see that oil prices are going to remain low, and plus there's still spare capacity. And then Trump as well begging the oil execs in the US to drill more, even though I believe that doesn't, they won't do it because they don't want to make losses on their investments. So that's how it is. You can borrow money. I have no issue with the country borrowing. Every country, the G7 countries have borrowed tons of money. But you have to fix the productivity side. That is how you get yourself out of it. I think last thing I'll say, Scott Bessent said something similar, that they will grow their way out of debt crisis by. But I said you can't do that if, like you said, if you use the debt sustainability rule, which is paramount to any IMF fiscal discussion. If you use the debt sustainability rule, which says that the real interest rate of your real economic growth rate has to be greater than your real interest rate, then if you do that, you can deficit spend, and then you can bring down your debt to GDP doesn't rise. But if you don't have the productivity growth rate and you want to deficit spend, you're only going to increase your debt and deficit sustainability much more higher. So that's just what I want to say.
Okay, and again, just to be clear, Nigeria's growth rate is lower than population, lower than productivity. We have a very, very... Yes. And I'll give you a good example. Let me just give you an example. The bridge in Mokwa, if you guys don't know what the bridge in Mokwa means, the food from the north comes to the south via that bridge. It's gone now, because of the floods. Okay. Where are the rails? We have no rails. The rail from Lagos to Kano is narrow gauge. Follow, guys, narrow gauge from Lagos to Kano. We have built standard gauge from Lagos to Ibadan. Then we stopped. Okay, we are now building a rail from Kano to Maradi in Niger. That rail line is standard gauge, but the rail line in Kaduna, the one that is in the north presently, is narrow gauge. So follow what I'm saying. In the whole of the north, they only have narrow gauge, apart from the one that goes from Abuja to Kaduna. Now the government has gone to start to build a standard gauge from Kano to Niger Republic. Let's assume that rail is completed tomorrow. Who would use it? Nobody. Why? Because it's not connected to any rail line coming to the south. It is standard gauge rail line. The entire rail line in the north is narrow gauge, which means if you want to send food, well, the food will go from Kano, then stop at the end of Kano. We can't put it on the rail that is going to Lagos or Port Harcourt because those are narrow gauge. You see the point about how we spend money in Nigeria? The government would have said, okay, let us continue that standard gauge from Ibadan, or even go to Kaduna, connect the Kaduna rail that is standard gauge to Kano. So you now have a network from Niger, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, Abuja. At least get to Abuja. Then you now connect the rail line that is an orphan from Warri to Abuja. Bringo, you have food in the north from that. But we haven't done that. But we are borrowing money to build that infrastructure. So it's not all infrastructure. It's good. This is the productivity gap CU is talking about. We are spending money on quote unquote capital productivity, but it's not adding to the productivity because it's not going to be connected. It's like building a power plant in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, Lagos needs power, which is what we did. We built power plants in the southwest. The gas fields are in the south-south. Then we connected them with transmission lines that cannot take more than a certain transmission cable. That's Olumide, come in and save us. You've heard what we're talking about Olumide. Debt sustainability, debt trap, that the fact that we want to borrow an obscene amount of money, about 50%, right, of the total foreign reserves, foreign debt right now. That's what we want to project to borrow. About 45 trillion naira, about 23 billion United States dollars. I think that amount, if I'm not wrong, Africa would know, that amount should be more than our net foreign reserves. What we want to borrow is not more than our net, not the gross that we. It should be more than the net foreign reserves, right?
Yeah, for 2024, yeah, you're correct.
So
yeah.
So we are borrowing more than the money. Okay, well, let me continue.
Good afternoon. Sorry, good evening. I think first of all, I totally align with your ideology towards debt. We always say, you always have this popular saying that we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, and I fully align with that because I first listened to the global picture about global debt, at Davos, and the world elite said that global debt is about $100 trillion, and it's already moving towards 120 in a space faster than the speed of light. And coming back home, after listening to James Diamond that said that we're expecting a crack in the US bond market. For people that don't understand, the bond market is the world's most systemic market where banks, institutions, governments, central banks get liquidity, financing, and to run different things. And from the crypto to stock market, it's a derivative of the bond market. For example, the stable coin, for example, has a large chunk of its exposure in the US bond market. You look at the mortgage, also has. So the bond market is very systemic. And when Jim Diamond was telling you that we should expect a crack, you don't take that statement lightly. Coming back home, when you see the kind of shocks happening in the global economy, and yes, we are coming from the bottom. Yes, we got upgraded by Moody. The fiscal policy looks brighter than. But our spending problem, if you read the FT article about President Tinubu's administration for the first 2 years, you could see they have concerns about the fact that we still spend like a crypto body, and I get scared because, Carlo, Yes, the excuse is that the 24 billion is the federation, not the federal government. Is a span of 2 years minimum. But the concern is that if you look at what the infrastructure we spent money on, state airports, on functional refinery, guest houses, government houses, you become scared because
Is that the list? Is that the list that they want to spend the money on? Is that the list?
No, not the list. I'm talking about what they spend the money on.
Gotcha.
Because we're looking at what they spend the money on. Definitely they make it look beautiful. They always talk about spending money on infrastructure. But when you look at the real infrastructure, you get worried. And I'm so happy Tony Elumelu spoke on Bloomberg and spoke about infrastructure deficit in Africa. And I'm sure he was looking more on the macro rather than Nigeria. But you know that the problems totally align with the problems in Nigeria. You look at 97 million Nigerians without electricity, and debt to GDP is about 50% when you add that amount of money. So it becomes scary when the finance ministry now explains to you that there's what we call productive debt. Debt is debt, whether it's used for purpose or it's used for its debt. And historical data has shown that Nigeria's debt has not been used productively, efficiently, and that's my major concern. So, Kalu, it goes back to the question of why this mess. Because you see, what scares me, Kalu, is not even just the debt, it's the opportunity cost. Let me give you a small sample of what I was discussing with my colleagues. It takes a child, if he's malnourished and he grows to the age of 18. If things go well for that child, for example, maybe experience or he happens to get good things, just because the child has had deformed years, the child cannot grow beyond that level. He might build up intellectually, he might build up, but physically, metabolic, health-wise, it has already been compromised because there's a certain age where your body will grow, your eyes will grow, particularly for ladies 18, for guys 21. So the fact that we have 18 plus children uneducated, and you look at the span decade right now, and you add another 10 years to that age, it means that they become more on the labor side. So it means we're having more liabilities to fend for. It means that we are having much risk in future. So, and with AI coming in play, it becomes very scary that where are we going to get the financing in future form? And the argument is that government definitely needs to close deficit. But we know that the major problem in the administration, not just this administration, over the last decade has been fiscal indiscipline, wasteful spending. And, I just hope that reasons will come to. Then you can't just only blame the Nigerian government. Multinational lenders also, it seems like they want to keep the country in a state because one begins to wonder why you're building infrastructure to nowhere. Nigeria is not connected to the north, the south, the east, and not aligned with real networks. The airports that we've built so far, just three major brings in about 92% traffic. The refineries that we have are looking like cops, and they are just FX liabilities. So the question is, why don't we sell them? Then the federal government also, I think he has kept his cabinet more politically than economically. We still have no business having more than 55 ministers. Carlo, to be honest with you, before I drop the mic, I think these are the questions we really need to ask the government, because while we could say the government has shown decency in certain reforms, the critical things affecting the populace, education, agriculture, health, is still biting. The average Nigerian's consumption, it's not something to write home about. And with the tax forms coming to play, I think the ammunition for the government is really running out, because tax reforms definitely might look painful with weak economic consumption. Dangote, yes, bringing production has really helped stabilize, increase exports, particularly in refined crude and fertilizer. But the fear that OPEC will release, OPEC has said that they're going to increase production in July, makes me also very scared, because the Saudis and Russians, they're trying to get market share. So it puts Nigeria in in a kind of parabolic situation where we now have to pray that crude oil prices stay above $60 because Donald Trump has really spoken aggressively on the fact that he really wants to keep inflation down and he wants to lower interest rates. So, Carlo, that's the sum of what I feel. I think debt, this is not it's not just the debt trap. I call it debt Armageddon because what is going to really happen to Nigeria is not just the internal shocks, the external shocks. We don't really have enough savings. We're spending like as if we are in Qatar or the Saudis, where we fail to understand that yes, we are already taking the right drugs, but we have also forgotten that the antibiotics in our body really requires enough metabolism for us to carry to the next stage. And that is my fear because when you take drugs without eating, then you become an inorganic liability in future. So that's my take.
So, question for you guys, CU Afribull, why can't the government bring out the list tomorrow and say this is what we want to use the borrowing for? They are denying the amount. Why can't you just come out and say this is what we want to spend the money on?
And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You mean and you know. I've looked many reports. If you look at the template of loan reasons for financing, it makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't think. One of the problem I think we have is not the formation of ideas; it's the implementation of policies. That's the major problem. So, for example, you look at the cost of running operations in Nigeria. I listened to, I can't remember who was talking on space when I had to compare the cost of pipeline in Venezuela, a rocky area where even has a lot of risk, Russia, Siberian forest, with Nigeria that runs on the plane. And I found out that running contracts in Nigeria is very expensive. So the question is, you have to look at all these problems before, and that's why the average Nigerian will tell you that it's not the formation of what they want to use the money is the money going to be traditionally used. And this year I showed that the Nigerian public is right. We're coming from a government that spends less than what Google makes in a quarter. But you look at the type of presidency we have, one of the most expensive in the world, and it's really a concerning trade across Africa where materialism is also celebrated. So I think it's not just even about buying. I think the question is judicial use of funds. And the funds that were wasted, what happened? The refinery issue, for example, billions of dollars, that will send more than 10 million kids to tertiary university from basic education. Is wasted. What happens next? We had cases of somebody building several houses in Abuja. So these are problems.
So we have an economy where we have no horizontal rail lines. You can't go from, say, Nasarawa to Yola by rail. It's not possible. You have to do some gymnastics. We have a country where...
Yeah, that's a problem. Because you look at the US, for example. The US is a country of 50 states. Even the fact that the US is not interwoven with rail networks like Europe, you will see that they connected their economic lines. Texas, New York, California, there's a connect. We're not seeing it in, for example, Kano, Lagos, Anambra. There should be, these are economic lines, And the advantage of building on economic lines is that it amplifies economic unity, it produces prosperity, because already that line is business interactive. So I think government really need to look at all this formation if we really want to get to the next level.
Yeah. And again, we have an economy again. I see you. We have an economy again where there is no power supply, even for 12 hours for a company to plan and say, I want to produce for 12 hours straight. They can't get that. We have an economy where you can't go by road from, say, Lagos or Enugu or, say, Sokoto to another part of the region on an express road. We have them by name, but you can't go from one region in Nigeria to another region in Nigeria with an express road. So you just step on the brakes, close your eyes, and just go. So I'm making these are infrastructure, low-hanging fruit that you can also invest in. See, you go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something. So what do we look at it like this? I like to look at things from a different perspective. Like, I agree with all you're saying, but what if let's say, all things being equal, we decided to move this deficit spending, this government spending, whatever it may be, what form it is, we move that into the private sector. That's, I think, because what you're doing is you're creating more injection into the circular flow of the economy rather than withdrawals. So if you move the government spending, you move the fiscal spending into the private sector, take a lot less of it out of the public sector, you're going to see that all those economic activities that you're talking about will would bring our deficits and debt to GDP down, which is actually a better metric.
See, what you're saying is that we should issue bonds and sell to the private sector. That's what you're saying.
No. I'm saying that we should move fiscal spending. It could be issuing of bonds, yes, for most of it should be in growth, supply side policy. Allowing, for example, if we are doing roads, for example, why don't we, let me give you an example, right? So I read a few weeks ago that the United States, for example, if you look at private credit, right? Private credit is not going to be the main financing of infrastructure because what Doge and Trump administration are doing in cutting costs, there isn't going to be any money left to, finance, infrastructure in the US, airports, terminals, utilities, all that kind of thing. So what I'm saying is, if we know that we have a debt problem, why don't we, if you don't want to cut spending, why don't you move that spending into the private sector? Allow more of these individuals to come and say, okay, we're not going to do these projects. Let these guys who have more economics of skill, more expertise, have more of the experience to come and finance these activities. Because what you're doing effectively is that you're bringing once these guys have enough free cash flow, what you're effectively doing is that they will you're going to see, if you're using the automatic fiscal stabilizer, you're going to see more increase in your tax revenues. So that's much more withdrawals. If it works like that, that's just what I'm thinking about.
But don't we have that already? Don't we have the tax credit scheme where you can build a road or infrastructure and then you get a tax credit? We have that. I think MTN is supposed to be building the road in Owerri to Onitsha. I know they've done it. That's what we have to look at. That.
I think the problem, Carlo, to be honest, I think it's beyond that, because look at the power sector, for example. Look at the likes of Elumelu, Transcorp, Power, Abuja exposure there, and look at the problem they have. Governments participants don't pay for their services. How do you want the power sector to thrive when government itself don't pay bills? Look at what happened when the Nigerian Navy had to really create a movie architecture electric. The question is not just moving. The question is that the ability to understand our limits. Nigerian businessmen are not magicians. They are also clean. I believe they are clean. Look at most of them. They are already in the critical aspect of the economy. And trust me, people need to understand that despite the fact that Nigeria has so much opportunity, the currency and security risk makes it very tough for foreign investors to align in. So most times a partner or the richest guys in the country take the bill. So the fact that Dangote is already busy with petrol, Elumelu is busy with Elumelu is busy with electric, it tells you that we really need to cut our code according to our size. Yes, I agree with the fact that private partnership need to take control, but the honesty for the government don't pay bills, politicians don't pay tax. It's a popular list, former minister spoke about the number of people that pay taxes in the country, high network taxes. So the question back is, when the person that creates the rules don't obey the rules, what do you give the populace? So the government needs to lead by example. If we want to have a small functional government, yes, it's possible. If you want to also have a big government that really wants to achieve progress, then you must lead by examples. That's what Nigerians are calling for.
I like what you say, but I'm saying that we already have it. And I think, look at it this way. If you want to build a rail line across, say, the southeast or northeast states, you can't have it the government has to come in and pass those laws that will say in the states, for instance, right of eminent domain, taxes will be deferred to make the project bankable. But I think if you go to a particular state, yes, you can get it because it's just one governor. But productivity starts with linking regions in Nigeria. That's when you get the real productivity. Remember what I said? If you're a Nigerian exporter or importer or trader, You cannot drive from one region in Nigeria to the other region on a 6-lane clean expressway. We have all these expressways by name, but try and drive on the Lagos to Ibadan expressway. That's the one they've done. But go out of Ibadan, go west, and try to go towards Benin. Then you start to see, okay, there's a video of going from Port Harcourt to Aba. Olumide, have you seen that video? I posted it myself. I think every 10 meters, a police station, there's a police checkpoint. And I'm not exaggerating. There's a video. Every 10 meters, you can see the next checkpoint, and that's an express road. So if we don't take away those self-inflicted bottlenecks, the country can't grow. There's no productivity if a truck carrying food will stop 100 times for policemen to give them money. 100 times or minimum, because
but the excuse is that they say the intensity of insecurity in that zone, sit at home, government is trying to control. I get what you are saying. It makes a lot of sense. But I also feel that the government really needs to work with the state government and local authorities in addressing that. Because honestly, if you really want trade to hit high intensity, you need to invest in the East.
You can't.
And that's why
I wish I'm going to try to share the video again. It's just crazy that I'm not exaggerating. The videos on my TL, I have to find it again. It's literally 15 or 10 meters. Literally, when you stop for this police guy, you can see the next guy. I'm all. Listen, we have drones today. We have AI today. If they really are serious, you can use drones and AI and track every movement on that road. Every movement. You can. The thing will take the picture of the number plate to tell you that number plate is someone that is suspected. In the state here, there's a technology they have here. If you drive into a county and your number plate is wanted for a crime in another place, the police will be alerted that this car has come to this county. They will know exactly where you are, and they can just drive and meet you there. It's not an expensive tech. It's just drones with a camera that can read number plates. So I'm just saying that it's to have a checkpoint every 10 meters. That's an overkill. But let me get Omar. She has changed his name. Bright Bitoye. I don't know which long name this one is now. Bright. What's this long name? Omar Lua Bilo. What is that?
Just call it Omoluabi. Just call Omoluabi.
Bright, you've come again. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm doing very well, thank you, sir.
It's been a while.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've had a conversation where we've agreed that we must borrow. We've agreed debts and deficits are stimulants for economic growth. We don't mind the government borrowing for infrastructure. We are worried about the volume that they are borrowing without the disclosure on where these funds are going to be going to. We are worried that if they do not borrow right, Nigeria will be in a debt trap because oil revenues are declining while the cost of debts are going up. What's your take?
So for me, Kalu, when I checked that MTEF, I realized that it's a plan. It wasn't something that is going to happen soon. It was a plan that needs to be approved. And based on that, I wouldn't want to give myself a headache. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think we pay too much emphasis on the federal government. We left the state governors that are doing reckless spending. You just mentioned something about infrastructure, about airport. You just spoke about it briefly in the past. So many states are building airports. Why do they need airports? And that's when we have a problem. We call federal government at every time. We say federal government is doing reckless spending. And I think the reckless spending is not limited to the federal government. State governors are telling you categorically to your face that we are stopped borrowing. And the money they are getting, they are not being productive with it. Rather, building projects that cannot even help the economic of their state. I'll give you an example. That Port Harcourt Way road you were talking about, I passed through that road 3-4 weeks ago. I was in Owerri. I don't know what happened. I don't know if you remember a week AP did something to their flight. So I have to travel from Owerri to catch the flight in Port Harcourt. And for me, I was ashamed for the state governors from that part of the world. And let me, please, people, this is one thing that I just realized. This country is quite big, that let's agree that the federal government is too slow. If Nigeria is going to function properly well, then the state governor, especially now that they are getting money, there are state governors that are fixing federal rules, and at the end of the day, they will get their money back. I mean, it's so painful for me that I went to Owerri, from the village where I was to Owerri Township. It takes us only 35 minutes because they did that road. Even though that road that was done, the side road, the drainage on the side that ought to be covered, it was left open. In that 5 days I spent on that, I saw 4 accidents. Let's leave that aside. But my point is that if state governors decided to spend, and I think this has been always my argument, please forgive me about all these our physical discipline, blah, blah, blah discipline. If the state governor decided to invest $1 billion naira into food, into, let's even say 500 million into agriculture on a monthly basis, simple thing. A lot of them have land that is not cultivated, it's just there. If you decide to say that with this 500 million, I'm going to buy tractors, I'm going to buy the things I need to do farming, on a monthly basis, just spend 500 million. Do yourself, go to those villages, because I pass through villages, and those villages by 6 p.m., 7 p.m., you pass through those villages, you see young, vibrant children, between 15 and 21. They were standing by the junctions of those places because there's no light. So meaning that during the day, they are not productive. This is not limited to Owerri. I was going from Abuja 2 weeks ago. I drove from Abuja after 8 or 9 years. I've not driven on that road. I drove from Abuja to Lagos. And between Abuja and Lokoja, that road is a nightmare. And the reason I'm saying this is that I don't want to us stay in and do these calculations that we're doing. If I'm going to borrow money, if it is me that I'm going to borrow money, I would rather borrow and say that, look, this the tax to credit that they did, that Dangote used in fixing Oroshoki, MTN is using to fix those other roads. Why can't we open that thing up to so many companies in Nigeria to make it like Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, like you said? I spent between Abuja to get to Ekiti, no, to get to Ondo State. It takes me almost 8 hours. In the process, I lost my exhaust. And when I use that road, the first thing that comes to my head is that I can't imagine how any logistics business can work in Nigeria. Let's not deceive ourselves. Because I met quite a lot of trucks that broke down in that bad road and the rest of them. So, now, there are even some that were state roads. For me, if I have a highway that passed through my state, I am telling you as a governor, I will spend that road. I will spend money to fix that road and get my money back from
I don't interrupt you, but let me just say this, right? So the issue is the federal borrowing is also state and federal. Remember that this borrowing we're talking about is not the federal government alone borrowing. It is federal and state. And what we're trying to talk about is that the borrowing is going to create a debt trap. You are talking about the effects of the maladministration. I get it, and I think I support the point you are making. But the issue we are trying to raise is this. You have to borrow right. I hear you saying the figure. If you borrow this 45 trillion and you use it to build a new railway to Niger Republic, it's not going to add productivity if it's not connected to the existing railways. And the point is not the borrowing, but what that borrowing is being used for.
That borrowing, there is the one that is going to. There is the one that is going to the southeast from Lagos.
How do you know?
There's another one.
How do you know?
No, no, I can't wait. So the thing for me is this, like I said, that borrowing.
No, I'm asking because I don't have the record. And again, you said the medium-term framework. The medium-term framework has 8 trillion in it. Does it have 45 trillion? It has 8 trillion in it. No, that's number one. Number two, if you say it's a plan, then why are they writing to the Senate to approve it if it's a plan? What's the letter for? Is the letter just to say, oh, we already have medium-term framework, we want to remind you of that, just to be reminded? No, they are writing to the Senate to approve. That's why the Senate sent the letter to the Committee on Debt. Remember, the Senate President said, I forwarded letters to the Committee on External Debt to review. What will the committee do? The committee will give their recommendation, then it will be approved. It is only with that approval can the Ministry of Finance and the DMO then issue the securities to borrow. So that idea that it's already in the medium-term framework, it doesn't follow. That the process is so, just as I've laid out. You have got to write and intimate the Senate that you'd like to borrow. Then the Senate will approve that borrowing, and then you can borrow exactly what Buhari did. But in the end, Buhari printed 22 trillion. It didn't go to the Senate. What happened when he was leaving office? He had to issue a bond. The Senate and the House approved that bond. The DMO then issued and added that bond to Nigeria's debt. So that story is not going to fly, my brother. Just saying, oh, he's off. He dropped off. Sorry about that. Let's go. Oluwaseun, how you doing, sir? Let me add my brother back. Oluwaseun, you've got the floor. Please go ahead. Let me add you back.
Thank you, Kalu. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so it's actually been a very interesting topic so far, and thanks to Lumide also for his contribution. So for me, I think, like everyone said, borrowing is actually not a big deal. But we've got a problem as to where the borrowing is actually going to. Like, take for instance, Abeokuta in the States has more flyovers than Manchester in England.
What?
And Abeokuta in Ogun State has more flyovers than Manchester in England.
That's an interesting stat.
Then Manchester has several cars than Abeokuta in Ogun State. So it makes me question why Abeokuta should actually have more flyovers than a very economically vibrant city like Manchester in England. Then, like in Manchester, every road actually leads to somewhere. But we have a situation in Abeokuta where once you leave the major road, then you are literally on your own. And also, we have a situation where state governors actually also neglect rural areas. And in so doing, they actually indirectly create more pressure on the urban area because youths from the rural areas will actually have to migrate riding Okadas in the urban centers, which is actually also creating a huge problem on farming activities, which is actually the bedrock of economy within the rural areas. So we have state governors that actually deliberately neglecting the rural areas. So what kind of growth are we actually expecting in this kind of scenario, which is actually so bad? And also, I also think we also have a huge problem with accountability. Just of recent on Arise TV, a TV presenter was actually questioning the Minister of Works as to the cost per kilometer for the coastal road. And right on Twitter, we can all see the reaction from those that are actually in support of government. It's like everybody, people don't actually want to be, we don't like accountability, quote and unquote. And I don't see where the country is actually headed in this regard. That's my submission, Kalu.
Yeah, someone just fact checked you on this Abeokuta bridge thing, and he said it's actually true. That's interesting. I didn't know that, and it's interesting. So, is it because Abeokuta is expanding, so they are building, in anticipation of the population of cars?
No, Kalu. I see it as a kind of misplaced priority. Maybe flyovers are actually cash cows for governors. And Osun too. If you look at the recent project in Osun, you can see also flyovers are flying around in Osun. And this is an economy whereby not every household have cars. So Abeokuta is actually about, if not 3 or 4 times the population of Manchester. And there are many more cars in Manchester, far many more cars in Manchester than Abeokuta.
That's interesting.
So which actually shows that people are really poor. There are far lesser car owners in Abeokuta. So now, in Manchester, like I said earlier, every road actually leads to somewhere. There are so many routes which would actually get one to his destination. If you look at the inner roads in Abeokuta, they are totally bad. And this is actually just to support your claim on us. Nigeria not being connected. Our cities and states are not being connected to each other. So it's actually also happening within the smaller units of the country. So I think it's actually a very larger problem, and also linking to the fact that governors and governments actually spend on things that are not relevant.
Yeah. I saw an infographic from 1973, and it was like the train schedule in 1973. So it was like if you want to go from Port Harcourt to Lagos, it will take you 3 days. So you do Port Harcourt, then you go to Kaduna, then the trainer goes from Kaduna to Lagos. If you want to go from Lagos to Kano, it takes you a day because it just goes straight from Lagos to Kano. That was 1973. Today, nothing has changed. If you want to go from Port Harcourt to Lagos by train, the minimum is still going to be that 3 days. Nothing has changed from 1973. And I know this because I've gone on a train from Jos to Lagos. And you go Jos, you go all the way to Kafanchan. Kafanchan is where you have the changeover to go from the northern line to from the western line to the eastern line. You change over in Kafanchan. It was built by the British. So look at the point I'm making. All the oil Nigeria has earned from 1960 to date, Nigeria has not added one brand new line of rail. The only brand new line is going to be the one from Abuja to Kaduna and the one from Itakpe to Warri. Itakpe to Warri is for Ajaokuta. It's not for commercial. It's to carry iron ore. We just built train stations to make that look like it was only for iron ore. Literally from 1960 to date, Nigeria has only added, the only brand new line is this Itakpe one, which was built in 1980s. 1980s. I saw that train with my eyes in the 1980s. Julius Berger, Itakpe to Warri. I saw it. And then the one that goes from Kaduna to Abuja since 1960. All the crude oil money is to go from Port Harcourt to Lagos. You will go from Port Harcourt, you will go all the way to Kafanchan. Then you will change a train and then go from Kafanchan to Lagos. How can a country that says it is the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa not be able to connect two regions? Now the bridge in Mokwa is down. I told people on Twitter, go and buy food. No one people told me, with which power? How do you store the food? Because the food we're talking about is tomato and pepper. Where are you going to store it if you buy it in bulk? And this is a serious question in the year 2025. That Nigeria, you cannot store pepper and tomato because there's no power. So sometimes we speak flowery, like he's Oluwaseun just we speak these flowery things, we do this flowery project. But what's the economic impact of this? Why are we borrowing? If we borrow this money for power, if we borrow this 45 trillion, and they tell me in 10 years we're going to have power 24/7 in Nigeria, I don't think anybody will complain. I doubt anybody will complain. I doubt it. Oluwaseun, hang in there. Thanks for that. I'm going to have to investigate that more, but thanks for bringing that attention. And let's get Oxley Tech. Oxley Tech, you're here, then we'll get Ben, and then we'll go to Ayi Baba. Oxley, go ahead. Oxley, you ready?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, sir. We've got the floor. Yes, sir.
So, like the topic said here, I've listened to some submission from every other person. Well, in terms of thinking that whether Nigeria is entering a debt trap or not, there is really nothing wrong with borrowing. Seriously. There is really nothing wrong with borrowing. Most advanced economies are in debt. Their budgeting is they do deficit for budgeting. In fact, there is nothing wrong with borrowing. But my concern is, what is the Nigerian government of today doing with all the money that they are borrowing? Now, I think they put out a request to the Senate, that the National Assembly, that they are borrowing $21 billion. You know, so now the problem that people have, I listened to a clip from Arise TV where someone on the show was saying that he put a request, an FOIO, that's Freedom of Information request, on the National Assembly to see that letter that the president sent to the National Assembly, to see whether there is a list of projects that have been tied to that particular request for to go. I think the guy said that is FOI request has not been attended to. I don't know whether the Senate or the House of Reps will attend to it, because I don't have any problem with the request that they are making. But Nigeria should not be in the dark of what project that is tied to those doing. So I'll be watching to see whether anybody in government will come out and say, oh, this money that we are going to be taking, this is what it has been tied to. And I think even the multilateral agencies that are following that one, I will not sit down and think that they will approve those monies without having specific budget for specific project that's going to go through. And also then having a structure in place to be able to monitor on the ground whether those monies are used for those specific projects that they have given, for which they have given approval for. I don't think that IMF and World Bank and MTB function that way, or African Bank. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think so. That they will just give you money and leave the discretion of what you want to do with it. For you to go and do whatever you want to do with it. So that is my worry. My worry is our system is not, I'm just worried what are they going to be doing with the money. Now, Carlo, I just wanted to say something also, that why are you going into this borrowing when, after Buhari's time, before Buhari said they were paying 5 to 6 trillion on subsidy. Now, because of inflationary impact and all of that, I know that the subsidy, assuming subsidy was free on today, the Tinubu government will be paying close to 10 to 11 trillion in subsidy, maybe per annum. If you consider inflationary amount, inflation and whatever. If Buhari was paying 5 to 6 trillion, Tinubu should be paying 10 to 11 trillion per annum. So what the argument that the people in government is making is that they are sharing that the state government is getting more money from the savings. Does not make any sense. During Abacha's time, Abacha removed subsidy by less than 1 naira, maybe few commas, and he set up PTDF. We saw what PTDF put Buhari inside of PTDF. We saw what PTDF did. We all went to Nigerian universities in the 90s and early 2000s. We saw buildings in our federal universities that in the morning you will see this building was built by PTDF. Same with Jonathan and Yar'Adua. They removed some. Jonathan wanted to remove subsidy. Instead of us set up shortly, we saw mass transit buses all over Abuja, Lagos, that you will see shortly. You will see visible things that they did or they wanted to do with subsidy. Jonathan was not allowed to do something anyway, but they only set up a shortly. Now, what is this government saying that they are taking money from the subsidy and giving it to state governors? State governors, how? To filter the money? Why can't they set up a flagship project and say this 11 trillion, 10 trillion we are saving annually? This is a project that we have our flagship project where we are going to follow it so that Nigerians can see visibly. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. All this borrowing doesn't make any sense. In some way, there's nothing wrong with the borrowing, but I can't trust politicians with it.
Okay.
Nigerian politicians, we borrow money because they are just going to filter it away. And that's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the submission. Again, I did a tweet and I said I likened with an analogy that what Tinubu did was to operate on a Nigerian to remove his appendix without anesthesia. And then the day after the operation, he told the guy to go run a marathon. That's how I see it. I think they were being too clever is not the word, but maybe they were overthinking this. They were going to buy buses, but they had a CNG bus policy. I think they wanted to tie in the buses they were going to buy for the subsidy removal in with the CNG. So when they removed subsidy on day one, which the president did on day one, I don't know if that was a plan or if he was that. I don't know if he planned that for support. I don't think they were ready when the announcement was made. But when Tinubu says subsidy is gone, revenues came in immediately because subsidy removal is a revenue event. So revenues came in, and then the palliative did not follow immediately. They were waiting for CNG buses that I don't know if they have been deployed in mass as of today. And I think that's the problem. So they allowed the suffering to hit. Like you said, PTF was a palliative. So even when you are paying more for your fuel, you looked to your university, you saw that it was being rebuilt. You looked at your roads, you could see the roads being built. You are like, okay, I get it. This money I'm paying is rebuilding my university. I get it. But you will struggle. There was a time they were sharing rice. They removed subsidy and they were sharing rice. You will struggle to put your finger on what the states, the federal, and the local government have done with the subsidy removal. Because when you remove subsidy, it's a revenue event. The revenues doubled. States got more. We've seen some state governors doing wonders in their state. We've seen some state governors that are paying for nonsense in their state. So it's a mixed bag. But still, even the own federal government itself, what has it done? Because we are all federal. We might not all be state, but we are all federal. What have they done? There was a time they appointed Mrs. Hadiza or so, right, to sort of monitor this. Is then a report that these states have done this? I mean, PTF was also like this. The federal ran it, but there was a bit of the states that were owned by the roads were owned by the states, and the federal did it. So I just think that's the problem they're having today. There's a trust deficit right now with the Tinubu administration because people don't really trust them to borrow to 45 trillion and spend it because they got money from fuel subsidy and they did spend. That's just my take on that. Ben, I have you here. Ben, go ahead. Thanks, Oakley. Ben, you've got the floor. Ben Oaks.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Carlo. Thanks for hosting this interesting space. I like this last point you just raised about the subsidy removal and the sort of palliatives. So, whatever the government had, whatever the plan was to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. The idea of, okay, we're going to remove subsidy, so, immediately the price of transportation would go up. The idea of, okay, let's cushion the effects on transportation by buying the buses, the CNG buses. I don't know why they are obsessing over CNG, but it's a good one, and it's clean energy. So they're saying let's buy the buses and provide some sort of discounted, transports for Nigerians. In River State here, the governor, now suspended governor, what's his name again? Fubara Fuba's government actually bought a lot of buses. I wouldn't say they were enough, but they were just enough to be visible. You could say, okay, if you go to this place in River State, go to this place in River State, stand around there for a while. At a certain time in the morning, you would see a bus come. The bus is well labeled. You know how Nigerian politicians always label it well labeled. You see his face there, subsidy removal bus. You know that this is, and the price of transport is cheaper. But I don't think that what I would say, let's say 50-60% reach, that's the reach of the buses in River State, not even River State, Port Harcourt. I don't think it was even replicated. It was replicated in most of the states in Nigeria. What the president should have done was to, before you announce the removal of subsidy, he announced it on the first day of his inauguration day, which is very tricky. Raise a lot of questions. Was that the plan? Timing. What was their plan? These buses should have already been ready and deployed as subsidy, as you remove subsidy, so that to cushion the effect, the transportation effect, because if you deploy them at mass and people can actually feel and access these buses and pay less, or just not feel the increase, because we started seeing like 100% increase in transport, somewhere that you go for and spend 200 naira, it started becoming 300, 350, 400 in some cases. So if you could cushion that effect of increase in transportation, Nigerians would have at least had something to say, oh, this is what the government did to cushion the effect of transportation, and to have some sort of a multiplier effect. When those buses, the truth is that when those buses come into the transportation market and it's sufficient enough to supply a certain level of demand, even if it's like 30%, 25%, 40%, it will tell the drivers, the private commercial drivers, something. They may feel some. There's a chance, depending on the degree, there's a chance that they may feel some reduced demand. And that reduced demand will now incentivize them to limit the level of their increase. Because the truth, let me tell you what's about Nigeria. Nigerians always take advantage of situations to favor themselves. They favor themselves, whether as a group or as an individual, before Nigerians as a whole. So there's always a chance that the drivers know that, look, for us to make money, for us to make the same amount of money we're making, there's a chance that they know that instead of us to increase it from, let's say, 200 to 300, we can actually do 250 and make the same money we are making. But because of everything that's happening, they'll take the opportunity and move it to 300, or some people will say 350. So if these buses came out in masses and actually served at least I said 30% is okay, 30%, 25% of the markets in the urban areas, Port Harcourt, Lagos, Abeokuta, these main urban areas that you have a lot of rush demand every morning for transport. If these buses actually served that purpose, that's 40-30%. The increase, the burden that Nigerians would have had to bear as a result of the subsidy increase, the subsidy removal, the transport increase subsidy removal. Well, I don't know how, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say. The burden Nigerians would have had to bear would have been less. And this administration, just by doing this administration would have been able to say, yes, we removed subsidy, but immediately this is what we did to cushion the effects. But they failed. To me, they really failed. I think SIM tried to a certain level, but generally, as look at it from a federal perspective, they failed. There was no tangible cushioning effect. The buying of rice is rubbish. See, government just went to the market and bought rice from local rice farmers, bought rice in bulk and started sharing to Nigerians. Now, what that does is that will increase the demand of rice from the distributors or the farmers. So they will now have some sort of incentive to even put the prices higher. If you notice, when the government was buying rice in bulk from them and distributing to Nigerians, the price of rice was increasing. Like as it was happening, these two things, the price of rice was increasing. Then, okay, now let's even look at the rice that they bought. How many poor Nigerians actually even got this rice? So if they want to mention that this administration has done a lot, they've done some good things, they've done a lot of bad things, done a lot of good things. But that rice buying as to cushion the effect of subsidy is rubbish. It failed. It did not have, as far as I'm concerned, it had a negative effect on the cost of rice, and the rice did not even get to Nigerians. So that's what I wanted to say on the subsidy removal issue. Wale Edun said that initially I thought it was even about 5-6 trillion that we saved. Wale Edun said that the figure is around 20 billion that we've saved now from subsidy. Now the main issue now is spending. What are we spending this money on? What are we doing with this $20 billion? What have you people done with this money? So that the issue around subsidy, expenditure is the main issue. When we talk about this, let me just briefly say about this. Hurry
up, please, if you don't mind. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so when we talk about debt, yes, we've all established that debt is okay, debt is good. But the main issue for me for debt is the cost of borrowing, and what you spend the debt on. That's your expenditure. This government has been very, very, very irresponsible. If you look at even the 2025 budget, look at the latest insertions by NAS. You will see a lot of questionable insertions they made there. They allocated about 700 billion, if I'm not wrong. Yes, okay, now about 200 billion to ministries that are not existing again. The defunct Ministry of Sports, some MDAs are not existing, some departments are not existing. 200 billion went to them. Then you guys I think most of you would have heard about the street light issue. About was it 196 million for one street light? So if you investigate the latest insertions they made, it's filled with a lot of questionable projects, questionable expenditures to various MDAs. What are all these things? You have to ask, what are these things going to add? What are these things going to add to Nigerians' life? What are all these things like that? How are they going to benefit the life of an average Nigerian? So the level of fiscal indiscipline is very, very high. So when you borrow, it's not inherently bad, but what do you spend the money that you borrowed on? What do you spend it on? And also the cost of borrowing. On the issue of the cost of borrowing, NNPC's reserve-based lending deals, all those deals are very bad. Pledging your future crude oil to access cash now is very, very bad. So we need to, just to round up, we need to be very conscious of the cost of the money, the cost of borrowing, and what we spend, the debt we raise, what we spend the expenditure, what we spend it on. We need to be very conscious of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate those comments. Well said, well done. Again, we're just going back and saying the same thing, right? We don't mind the borrowing, but if the government tomorrow, Monday morning, was to come out with a list of projects that we're going to spend this on, this will actually help the government, because we'll then say, okay, we want to build this power plant, we're going to get 24-hour power, I want to build this road. People will understand. When you say we want to borrow $22 billion, 45 trillion naira, and we have no way of knowing where are you going to buy a new jet, a new yacht, new SUVs? Of course, people are going to ask questions. So it's your job to give the information. We shouldn't have to file an FOI to know where the government wants to spend our tax revenues. Kilo, let's have you. Cleo, let's have you. Cleo, KLIO. Yeah, I see you guys. Yeah,
yes, I can hear you.
Please go ahead.
I can hear you. So I've heard a lot of what people have said about this, what the Tinubu administration has done and all of that, and the debt trap and everything. 2 years after the policies that have been, I would have to say it's been a failure. It's our growth trajectory hasn't increased. Our debt binge has continued. You could see some markers that consumption has collapsed. The economy is essentially being propped up by government spending. Our net exports haven't really risen per se, especially in real terms. Yes, in nominal terms, it's increased. But when you correct it for US dollars, in some cases, it's even slightly reduced in US dollar terms. So one then has to start wondering, was this actually a good idea? And yeah, I think it's been a failure. I know there are a lot of people that will say, oh, Naira was mispriced, Naira was this, Naira was that, fuel was cheaper than it
So please try to steal your audio. You're going in and out. Steal your audio if you don't mind.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You're going in and out. Just look at the mic when you're speaking. Yeah.
Okay. So I think so when you look at all those different markers of the economy, there doesn't seem to me to be progress that we've made. At one point, I'd say the first 6 to 1 year, I was one of those people who thought or who said, oh yes, maybe the devaluation made sense, or we have to do it and all of that. But 2 years in, and we're looking at forecasts going forward that suggest GDP growth will be about what? 3.4, 3.5%. Our population growth is what? 2.5, 2.4%. Barely meaning, or essentially meaning that the average person's per capita income is increasing by just 1% or less than 1% a year. Like, the thing is, we are talking a lot here because, first of all, we are the elite of Nigerian society. Let's not say we are not. The average Nigerian is really, really suffering, and poverty has deepened. It hasn't gotten better. And if we're talking of insecurity, I know a lot of times in this state, people always talk about how we need to deploy more police. The greatest way to solve insecurity in the country is by fully employing people. You can carry all the soldiers, all the police, all you want. If there are many young men out there that do not have a future, do not think that they have a future, or are not gainfully employed, they will resort to carrying arms and doing illegal things. Let's just call it, the social implications are piling up. And social implications isn't just crime now. Even children born within this period. You can imagine when incomes in real terms have collapsed and people have to actually take care of children. They are not feeding their children as much as they can. So in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time, when we have children that can't adequately think, they're not very literate because the nutritional foundation has killed. We then start to say, oh, everything's about the educational system. It is beyond the educational system. These things have socioeconomic implications that will last decades. I suppose the Buhari economy has its own socioeconomic implications that will go to last decades. Now, the Tinubu situation has now compounded on top of a terrible situation. Like, the thing is, let's just call a spade a spade. So in the beginning of this year, the New York Times was reporting that about 31 million Nigerians, at least 31 million Nigerians, that's about what? A seventh of the population, were literally going to bed without eating. Now, do you really think that if we deploy soldiers, they can really arrest even a fifth of those people if they actually go out and start committing crimes? And they start actually making the country ungovernable and start forming militia and everything. Like, these are some of the implications. For me, looking back, I would say I will admit that I was wrong about the devaluation. It should have been done gradually. You do not devalue a currency by the level at which it was done so drastically, reducing people's income at such short notice. In many countries, it's not done in countries that have been successful economically. This is the kind of thing that they do in Argentina. They wake up one morning and just devalue the currency, and guess what? The economy basically is on its feet. And before people will come here and say Argentina is moving forward, its growth hasn't really improved. Yes, the IMF has given it thumbs up, the rating agencies have given it thumbs up, but its economy hasn't improved, and poverty has actually decreased. Now, with the issue of energy, you on the first day you don't see public accounts, and you just simply say fuel subsidy is gone, and in the space of a few months, prices of fuel increased by 6-fold in some parts of the country, and you somehow think that the consumption economy of the country will not suffer. Like, energy is an input to every economic activity. When it's increasing 6-fold, you essentially are taking or you are taxing individuals. Meaning they can't spend money on even the oil going out and buying bombs or buying pop-up, buying sugar and all these other things. People will say, oh, what are these? But these are the things that are subsisting people in the economy. I think it was a very rash decision. Gradualism, I know it is unsexy, I know it is one of these things people don't like to hear, people don't like to talk about, but it is now clear, abundantly clear, that gradualism was a failure.
Yeah.
And economy going...
Clear. I don't want to cut you off, but let's have you just for time, yeah? Just to get us to speak, yeah?
Okay, so just 30 seconds. I'm going to make these points. So an economy growing at about 3.5% means that for our GDP to grow from the current about $200 billion, it will take about 21 years. And at the current per capita growth rate that we are getting, it will take about 77 years. Now, how many of us can wait 77 years to increase our per capita income from about 870 something naira to about 8,600, which is still less than what Jonathan left it at in 2014, when it was about $3,000. We should think about these things in years, in people's lives. Years are lives that people are living. Please let us rethink this whole thing. This whole thing will be just rashly devalue things, increase energy prices and all those things. It was a very, very rash, and I think in the long term we are going to pay for it as a country. This whole thing we are talking about putting palliatives and everything. There is no way palliatives would have stopped that collapse in the real value of people's income that the Tinubu government ushered in on May 29, 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, great points there. I think you bring up the
Kalu, please, can I add some context to what?
No, because you just want to let others speak. No, just let others speak.
Very quick.
Just let others speak. No, just let others speak because I've been waiting. Just real quick. Let me get Bright, just real quick. I know you jumped off. Let me have you complete your thoughts, Bright. Then I can let others come in. Bright. Okay. Let's get Ayebaba.
Yes, Kalu, I'm here.
Yeah, I know you dropped off. Were you all done with what you were speaking about last time?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm almost done. But look, like I said, for me, if we're punctuating the federal government, I think we should start holding those state governors more accountable. And like I said earlier, if every state governor decided to put a factory of whatever product to add value to it in their state before those crops were moved out of their state, in each of their local government. Like I said to you, my state governor is building a flyover even when it's not needed. And everybody is praising him. I am not praising him. I would rather see him build a small factory that will cost only $200 million in local government, where those children that run around after 6 p.m. in the village square, that they will be running around the city. They will get small jobs to do. Government needs to increase the earning capacity of each citizen. I don't want to dwell in this devaluation, where even when the money was not devalued, when Jonathan had a very good, robust 60-something billion, we didn't do anything with it. So I don't want to live in this euphoria of let Naira be 1-to-1. I don't care. South Korea's currency is not the same. It's not 1-to-1 to dollar. But today, their production across the globe until we start working on what our output of our production. And that production is not going to be mainly by the federal government. It's the state governors and local governments. These are people we need to start putting fire in their ears. If those people are able to do those things, and I've said there's no reason state governors should not subsidize food in their states. Food. I'm not talking about any other thing. I'm talking about food. And let us not deceive ourselves. Hunger, as old as I am, as far back as 1982, I remember when Umoru Jiko said people have not started eating in the dustbin. I remember how people used to shout, "We're hungry." I remember when my uncles used to say that before then, they used to get shot when they left university. Our set did not get it. So the point is that, look, there are decisions that ought to have been taken 20, 30, 40 years ago that we refuse. We continue to play politics with it. And this is one thing I will say to the last. We need to stop politicizing issues in Nigeria. If we have problem, let's face the problem and fix the problem. Let's stop giving it political correlation. And the reason is that when we give it political correlation, we will never get solution to it. Because at the end of the day, the person that is coming to defend it is also going to give his part. We also have not been spoken about the student loan that is going on. We've seen that thousands of our students that normally, when they get admission, they couldn't further their education. They drop out. There are certain times, if 1,500 students write JAM, at the end of the day, the numbers that will go to that school will not be more than 200. But now it's a different ballgame. And for me, these are the kind of things that if the government invests more, let's even produce more of these students out of school. Perhaps some of them become productive, do something, do business, it will add to the economy. And for me, we need to spend more in our health. We need to, and that health system is not going to be federal alone. States need to do more. It still baffles my
all right.
State cannot run health insurance for his people. Everybody is still shouting.
Hey guys, I hear you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, guys. Just understand, guys. Lots of folks want to speak. I do get it. I don't want to cut anybody off, but just be mindful of the time. Just so we have I want all opinions to be heard. I don't know everyone that has his hands up will speak, but just let everyone speak, right? Aye, you got the floor. Aye, Baba, go ahead. You got the floor.
Okay, yeah. What I would just say is this: I see the situation in Nigeria is our problems start being politicized, and what you have is every side of the divide, both from the government side and the opposing side. You see a lot of propaganda about issues, every issue. Like for instance, now let's look at this issue of subsidy. When subsidy was removed, it's very, very erroneous for anybody to say like as if the money Nigeria had somewhere, and when you remove subsidy, you save that money. If we get it correctly, when Buhari was there, the Minister of Finance then was saying they were trying to use $2.2 billion Eurobond to finance subsidy. And the NNPC was not remitting anything to the Federation account. If you listen to what this former governor of Edo State said then, Obaseki, that they just go to Abuja for fake, and what the government was doing was just to be printing money. And that was what we had with Emefiele, the how many trillions of naira that in ways and means. So really, subsidy was not the money that you had. You were actually borrowing to fund the subsidy. So when you remove the subsidy, what you end up doing is you don't borrow anymore to pay the subsidy. Then NNPC can then pay money to the Federation accounts. And we need to understand any money that comes into the Federation account will be shared. The Constitution says shall be shared among the 3 tiers of government. So that's it. Where I blame the Tinubu government is this: the government does not lead by example. You remove subsidy. I don't expect that it's the federal government that will provide municipal transport in all the states of the Federation. But I expect the federal government to lead by example in Abuja, provide buses for people to be able to move within Abuja. Then you then give a kind of example for the states. Because if you look at the state government, it is the duty of the state government to provide municipal buses in the states where you remove subsidy. Education, primary and secondary education is within the responsibility of the states. How many primary and secondary schools does the federal government have? And then you look at primary health center, because if all these things are done, the effect of the subsidy will be less on our people. This level of subsidy removal that we've had, how drastic it is that to price from 200 naira to 1,000, no amount of palliative can solve it. You have to face the issue, provide buses to move people, make primary and secondary education, revamp it, let them be free and be qualitative so that people don't need to spend money on paying school fee. And then health sector, primary health center. When I was very young in Ondo State, I go to General Hospital in Ondo. You go there, they treat you, pregnant women get birth freely. They don't pay anything. So those things that needed to be done. That is African subsidy. And again, let's now look at this issue of debt. What I see in Nigeria is there's a lot of misinformation. Everything is being politicized. When a government presents a borrowing plan, and I want to take all of us on this, does that really mean that, okay, that is what the government wants to borrow? And Mr. Kalu, I would like to ask you, is there any entity in the world today that has $21 billion to borrow any government?
Yes. Yes.
At once, at a go,
yes.
In 1 year.
Yes.
That has $21 billion to borrow any government.
When I said this space, I gave you the statistics for World Bank. World Bank has given Nigeria about $4 billion in the last 6 months or a year. I gave it December 2023.
If you check the website of the World Bank, the last disbursement that was done to Nigeria was even last year.
What I'm just telling you is this: if you go back and look at the numbers, $4 billion has gone to Nigeria from 2023, 2022, 2024, and that's just from World Bank, not the IMF. Well, IMF gave Nigeria nearly $3 billion, right? We have about 35 billion in Euro bonds. The point I'm making is that, you've raised, after you finish, I don't want to interrupt you. If you have a medium-term plan, that plan says we want to borrow. You are right. It's a plan to borrow, right? Like a projection. Yeah. The projection there is 8 trillion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for 2025. The next year is about 7 trillion. So about 15 trillion for 2 years. In one go, the letter that the president wrote is for 45 trillion. So I ask you, why would
what I'm saying is that letter that came to the National Assembly, that is a borrowing plan. By the time
it's not a borrowing plan. It's they are requesting for the permission to borrow and spend. The borrowing plan is already in the medium-term framework. So this letter.
Okay, the question I want to ask you now: is there any entity that will borrow money to Nigeria without that money being tied to a specific project?
Yes. What project is nutrition tied to? When the World Bank gave Nigeria $500 million for nutrition, what project was it tied to? When we got the IMF,
it will be tied to something that probably for nutrition.
You can borrow. Listen, I'm giving you direct quotes. Go to the DMO, Debt Management Office website. Pull up the use of funds. You see budget support. You see railways. You see telecom. But you see a line called budget support. Budget support is the highest use of borrowings in Nigeria. DMO. Go to DMO website. Pull up.
What I'm saying is, when you have that kind of plan come to the National Assembly, it's supposed to be debated at the National Assembly, right? For even Nigerians to make input into it. Let's look at, okay, what is this borrowing really for?
But nobody, was there any debate? When we borrowed from the World Bank, I've never had any debates. I've had the space here with the World Bank people. We've had a World Bank space here. We don't go to this assembly to debate anything. We borrow. The World Bank gives us.
One thing I know about World Bank borrowing is very stringent. The conditions are very stringent.
But they just give us
those loans are even approved.
I hear you,
and
my
by
brother.
The time they are approved,
I am saying that.
Enforcement.
I'm answering your question. Have we ever debated World Bank loans in Nigeria? We just borrowed $5 million, I believe, last 2 months.
Has there ever been any borrowing from the World Bank that doesn't pass through the National Assembly if we are in a democratic setting, not during the military?
No, what you've asked me, I've answered you over and over.
The question I'm trying to pose is this. If we have a situation where, no matter how flawed our democracy is, we have the National Assembly that is in session, and the president, because the essence of having the National Assembly is power intoxicates. You can't have one man wielding absolute power, that there must be check and balance. If you want to do this thing, you pass it to the National Assembly. The National Assembly has to approve.
What about the state of emergency? Was it not done after it was approved? I mean, we can't eat and we can have it. The president announced state of emergency, then
No. Concerning the state of emergency, the president can make a motion, and the constitution mandate that the National Assembly must take it to the session within 7 days to either reject or approve it. The National Assembly, during the time of Goodluck Jonathan, when Jonathan extended the state of emergency in Borno, they rejected it. The House of Rep, led by Tambuwa, because we must look at where the failure is coming from. If the National Assembly are supposed to do something and they are not doing it, you understand? We must.
No, but I want to take you. I want to take you back to the things you said, and we haven't talked about the debt. I want to take you back to the subsidy, just for people that are listening, just so that we understand. When you pay subsidy, when we say the federal government does not pay subsidy. The Federation of Nigeria, the Federation pays subsidy. Federation means federal, state, and local government. They pay subsidy. What does this mean? It means that when NNPC sells crude oil, NNPC brings the dollar back to Nigeria, to JP Morgan account. NNPC owns that dollar. Then NNPC is supposed to pay the naira to FARC. So when we sell crude oil, NNPC earns dollars. Then NNPC remits the naira. They convert it to CPN. They remit the naira to the FARC. When we pay subsidy, NNPC is the one paying the subsidy. NNPC, not borrowing. NNPC. So NNPC would debit that naira and remit nothing. That's why MFL is set for 3 years. NNPC had remitted nothing because they were using the subsidy money. I just want to explain. Hold up, sir.
Let me take you on in that area.
Sir, please, sir.
Hold on,
sir. Please let me finish. Then you can.
There's a lot of misinformation.
Please, I let you talk.
During Buhari,
I let you speak, sir. Allow me explain. You will speak. I'm not cutting you off. I let you speak. I did not interrupt you once. Allow me speak, then you can speak. I'm explaining so folks listening can follow the conversation. Subsidy is paid by the NNPC. That's so when the NNPC pays a subsidy, there is no remittance to FARC. So it's the federation that pays. So when you remove subsidy, what happens to that federation money? Money flows into the federation account. That's why you see today FARC has doubled because there's no more subsidy payment. NNPC is now remitting the full amount to FARC. That's why states and the federal government have gotten more revenues from FARC. Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. You want to speak or okay? Then to the second point about the borrowing in 2024, December. Note the date I'm quoting. December 2024, Nigeria borrowed $2 billion to implement the 2024 budget. Hear me again. December 2024. That's at the end of the year. We borrowed $2 billion at a go to implement the 2024 budget. So when you ask, can any entity borrow 25 billion? Nobody's going to go and borrow 25 billion. But what you are saying is that you want to borrow 25 billion. The question is for what? You simply can't have a blank check. For what do you want to borrow the money for? Is it going to be used for A? And then you say it so that we come and we ask you questions. We are citizens and taxpayers. When you borrow, it's a tax hike. So as the government, you must come back to the people and hold yourself to be accountable. That's all we're saying. If I is not going to speak again, we're going to move on to Adekola. Adekola, you've got the floor. Adekola, you got the floor. Let's get Ken. Ken Uti. Ken, please go ahead.
Wow, thank you very much, Carlo. Good evening, everyone. It's been a great discussion, and focusing on the topic means Nigeria entering a debt trap. Well, with the bold plans we are having, the bold borrowing plans that the government is pursuing, especially with the recent, what we have discovered about the $21 billion loan request. I mean, it's the highest, single number I've heard in terms of loan for Nigeria. And the first thing I did when I saw that headline was I had to start reading to know exactly what is being tied to this amount. It is ambitious. I was expecting to see something like the goal of this amount is to upgrade our, I don't know, maybe transmission line in the country, in the major cities, to a super grid, which I would 100% support such amount, because of course to have super grid in the country you will need to spend, if not close to that kind of amount. I was also checking to see, would this amount be tied to projects that will connect all the major cities by concrete highways, that will guarantee their effectiveness over 50 to 100 years, and also connect all the major cities by rail. I couldn't see anything like that, and I had to go and look at the video where the Senate president was read the letter, and he read the letter, and there was no purpose for this loan. And knowing that we already have a midterm borrowing plan that is already approved, so what is this loan going to be used for? With this type of behavior, this is a very dangerous precedent we are trying to establish here. We saw how reckless the Buhari regime, together with Emefiele, printed money without recourse, without regard for an existing law regarding how much we can print and borrow in ways and means. Now we are seeing a situation where a blank check is being requested for this amount of loan without it being tied to something. And we know what our Senate president is capable of. We've seen it on live TV, where the National Assembly would vote on a particular issue, maybe a yes or no, and the man would strike his judgment and pick the other decision, favoring what he wants to do. This is dangerous, and I think Nigerians need to speak up. We need to be shouting on this, because yes, they might say we are not in a debt trap. You might say Standards and Poor's just recently upgraded our rating to I think a BB 1 or something like that. They just recently upgraded us, and that might mean, oh, okay, the coast is clear, we can borrow. There's no risk anywhere. Our economy is doing very well. Our economy is not doing well if more than half of your population is in abject poverty. We're not doing well if our GDP moved from number 1 overnight to number 4 in Africa. We are not doing well. We are not doing well. I'm really shocked. Our debt currently stands at about 145 trillion naira. You can't pay a mere 3 billion naira IMF loan, and then you come the next morning saying you want to borrow 21 billion that is attached to absolutely nothing. If President Buhari can come today and say this money is for this project, and this is what we plan to achieve, and we want to build cold rooms that will help us save the 50% of agricultural produce that we lose every year, which will further crash the prices of food produce in Nigeria. Can 100% I'm for it, because I know that there is going to be value for that loan. What happens in Nigeria is that we keep awarding contracts that are overbloated, overpriced contracts. The question on the ground is the cost per kilometer of that mere 4% of the 700 kilometer road. The cost per kilometer Kalu, it is high with respect to what you can do in any part of the world, even in the US, in Europe. Cost per kilometer of that road is about $16 million.
Okay, but they built it, right? It's built, right? I'm just saying.
I don't have any problem with it being built, but what is the value?
I hear you, but I think we're focused on this cost per kilometer. Okay, I saw someone say this about 14. Let me look at the figure someone's giving me here. They built it. You know, for me, it's like I've had people that have taken loans and not done anything. This one has been built.
I get you, but let's not justify that practice, because we're talking about money that could have built 60 kilometers.
I hear you.
30 kilometers.
I hear you. So I'm hearing it's 14.2 million per kilometer. That's what it does.
It's still more. It's still more what you get. If you bring a Chinese contractor to do that job for probably, I don't know, maybe 7, it will cost 5 million per kilometer to build in China. Okay. So a contractor from China now to come do it in Nigeria, probably maybe 7 million per kilometer, and they will give you the same thickness, concrete, falling road you want. The same. Why do you need to spend $4 or even more to realize that that contract was done on a single source? You don't do contracts like that on a single source, except that you have justification. There's no other contractor that can do kind of job in the world. Then you can say, okay, this is the only guy that can do it in the world. Whatever your price is, take single source.
No, I'm just asking you the most advocate question. I agree with the broad points you're making, i.e., perhaps it's a bit expensive, but it was built in 12 months. I said 12 months. It built in 12 months. I will be more concerned if it's not extended out. For me, you've been in Nigeria where we talked about money approved is not money dispersed. There is no, like we've said, you can't go from region to region on a good road in Nigeria. If this road can extend and can do what they say they want to do, oh my God, then thank you very much. But I have a feeling that this is the end of this road. He has already flown a kite and said they've met a swamp. He has already flown that kite that they saw swamp. When I have a post still on Twitter, when I saw this road and they were going to build this road, they said in 10 years or so. No, they said they were going to build the road in 4 years under Tinubu. I said it's not possible to build this road even in 10 years because of the swamps. The reason why the east-west road is not built is because of the swamps. You can't build a road like this in 4 years or even 8 years of Tinubu. It's not possible. And it's only Berger that can do it because they are large, they have the equipment, they can come and tribalist, you are, but have we not seen it now? We're not going to Niger Delta, we're still in Ogun State. He's saying there's swamp in Ogun. Which Nigerian does not know there are swamps outside Lagos? Eleko itself, I grew up in Lagos, where you had Mobile. This was, what year was this? 1990? No, 1980s. My friend went to visit our friend whose father lived in the Chevron quarters beside that Mobile, where Mobile was now. I remember we were driving, we went through swamps, monkeys, crocodiles, and you get to that, where Mobile is now. It was swamp and crocodiles on all sides. Then Mobile just built that thing there. There was no first, second, or third roundabout. It was just that Mobile thingy there. I was like, why is this guy living here? His father is an oil company guy. Why is he living here? Around them, I'm not exaggerating, there were palm swamp, like a swamp. You go on the bridge, if you look left or right, it's a swamp. And Mobile built that thing there. So even Lagos, that Leleko, that whole Lekki phase one, it's still a swamp. And it goes from Lagos like this all the way to Cameroon. The same thing. So that's why East-West Road, and East-West Road is not in the coast, though. It's in the landed area, and still they can't build it. How many years have you tried? And you want to build a coastal road in 8 years? It's not possible because it's just you need one guy can't do it, and you need a lot of money. So, but here we are. So this road is fantastic. I think it's going to end here. They will do a few things. They will do Calabar. They will do fanfare on Calabar land. But once they cross Calabar and enter the swamps, that too will stop. they will enter elections. Nobody should again till after elections. Then somebody will come, they will build Benin on the land side. They will take pictures, but the swamp is the issue. The coastal road is a problem because on the coast. So unfortunately, it is what it is, right? I hope they build it, because it will boost commerce. There's no east-west link from 1960 till today. Nigeria does not have an east-west link, none. So whether you like Tinubu or you don't like Tinubu, they have to build this road or this rail. Goodluck Jonathan gave the largest contract in the history of China to the Chinese railway company to connect a railway line from Lagos to Calabar. It's not even on the coast. It's that difficult that contract was the largest contract ever given to a Chinese company in the history of China, largest foreign contract, to build it from Lagos to Calabar. Railway, not on the coast. Then you think high tech would just wake up and can build a coastal road do you know how many bridges they have to build? Do you know how many bridges they have to build just to go from Lagos to say, not even Delta, or just across Ogun State? Have you driven to Eleko before? Have you driven all the way down before? Well, let's hope that God did, as we say in Nigeria, God will build it for us. Rashid, you've got the floor, Rashid. Go ahead. Rashid, go ahead. Rashid's hand is up. Rashid, can you hear him? Let's get Oluwole John Crowder. Nice.
Hi. Sorry, I had issues.
Hey, Rashid. Yeah, go ahead, Rashid. Yeah, Rashid, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. So I just want to quickly talk about First, I'll talk about how important the subsidies were. The removal of subsidy and the floating of the naira was actually for the economy. I mean, someone already mentioned how we had back pays, and then they were also selling our trading future resources for crude oil and all those things. For fuels and all those things. But also for the naira and the value of the currency, it was also very important to float the naira, which is actually quite different from just increasing the price of the dollar or reducing the value of the naira. It's different. All they did was remove the regulations, like the government restrictions on the price, which was being funded basically by the CBN using our reserves. And not only was it detrimental to our reserves, it was also detrimental because it was an avenue for corruption. And it's not just normal arbitrage corruption. There was deep-seated corruption in that particular system where people would have to make requests and businesses would have to make requests through certain connections to get certain amount of dollars and all those things and all those convoluted processes that made it not really harder to do business, and was just a corrupt system in general. And there was also draining our resources, our financial resources. So it was completely bad. It was not a good thing. And so it had to be removed. It had to be floated. So they didn't reduce the value of the naira or anything. They just floated. They just allowed the market to determine it. And then once in a while, as we've seen, then the CBN intervenes and tries to maintain that stability. And then I also wanted to talk quickly about the coastal highway. Personally, I'm very, very optimistic about Tinubu's vision and plan to complete the highway. And I mean, I've listened to David Umahi talk about it a lot of times, and I believe in him somehow, for some reason. And then we talked about how hard it is to complete roads like that. The Americans built the interstate highway in 35 years. It was about 46,000 kilometers, and then they did it in 19 whatever. I don't know when they did it, but a long time ago. We are in 2025. We have more resources. We have more resources, but there's technology build up and everything. And personally, I feel like it can be done. Maybe not in 4 years, but 6 years.
Yeah, but that's the point, sir. I think I want the road more than you. I don't think that you can find any real Nigerian, anyone that says he loves Nigeria that is against this road. You won't find any, because if this road opens up, there is no road, guys, from the east to the west. There is Lagos Ibadan Expressway, which is an expressway. Then from Ibadan or Ore, down you have 2-3 lanes. You get to Benin, some things are happening. You get to where some things are happening. There's no real, like you say, the I-5 you have in America. It doesn't exist in Nigeria at that level. But the point is that the point I made to the folks on Twitter is you can't build this road in 4 or 8 years. Tinubu is not going to complete this road. So I would have wished Tinubu would have created an East-West Road Commission. Fund that commission with something, maybe 1% or 2% of gas flaring or something like that. Let that commission build the road. Tinubu will not be, this road can be built in 10 years. You've already said it in 16 years when America was building. It can't be built in 10 years. It's just too massive. A bridge alone will take you 12 months or 2 months to build. You're going to build nearly 70 bridges to go just to cross maybe 2 states. 70, because it's a coastal road. The folks that built East-West Road saw this and moved it more into the land. But when you go to the land, you are hitting towns. Coastal road is smooth, so you can build your 6 lanes and just go. That's really why you want a coastal road. So nobody's against the coastal road, my brother. We want it. But we have to be a bit more, it's not by prayer. Roads are not built by prayer or by good intent or by if someone speaks. No, let's be level-headed here. If Tinubu wants to get a commission, let the commission fund that road and let them build that road. That's just my take. Because it favors everybody now. It favors everybody. Because that road will now generate ports. If you have a road, you can build a railway. If you have a railway, you can build ports. So who doesn't want it? But we have to temper. Okay, but Rashid, I hope you get my point, sir.
Yeah, I do get your point, and I agree with you a bit actually, because to be realistic, projects like this take time. Like you've said, they are building like a lot of bridges. It's a coastal road, and there's going to be a lot of setbacks along the way, and it's going to take time. And I think I like your solution, and there are even other solutions like getting private investments and then trying to recoup their investments.
I think that what they should do is to say, let the federal government map the road out. Map the road out from Lagos to Calabar with spurs to Onitsha, all that. Map the road, right? Put a railway there. Then simply say, okay, if you want to build this section, this is what it will cost you. So, for instance, Delta State has got trillions in Naira. They have cash to burn. Delta State can say, contractor, come, we will fund 1 kilometer every month. Delta can say that. Bayelsa can say, contractor, come, we will fund 2 kilometers every month. And you start to build this road like Lego. So, Bayelsa can have their own 100 kilometers built. Delta can build 50 kilometers. Owerri can build this one. But you have the road already mapped out. It's already mapped out, and then you're just building like Lego. But if you wait for Mr. Tinubu to build that road from Lagos to Calabar in 8 years, my God, you're a dreamer. It's not going to happen. And when we say these things, I'm saying so that you can have the right structure in place. Have a commission or have an SPV. Fund that SPV now with a tax structure that will guarantee the funding. You remember, once you leave office, you are gone. The things that Buhari wanted to build, they've abandoned them. I hope you get the point I'm making. All right, let's get... Oluwale, thanks to Russia. I appreciate you, sir. Oluwale, please hop in right here. Oluwale. Oh, who was it? I was supposed to speak. I remember.
Yeah,
Oluwale, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
No worries, sir.
So, first and foremost, I would love to debunk some statement that some people have been making here. When some people are saying that we are politicizing this and that, the truth of the matter is that the variables that affect the lives of women in Nigeria is being controlled by the federal government. Is it interest rates, inflation rates, exchange rates? It is these variables, these macroeconomic variables, it is controlled by government. It's only controlled by federal government. So it is their policies that shape these variables, And in fact, in the last 2 years, the source of inflation in Nigeria has been driven by largely FX devaluations, like more than 65% of inflation in Nigeria is being driven by FX pass-through. Data is there, data is available. Many of us may not agree with what I'm saying. So subsidy removal is just a part of it, but it is majorly FX. Taiwo didn't mention these things. The president of tax reform bills, the president of tax reform committee, he said it. He said FX pass-through is major source of inflation. Then at the same time, is it Tilewa Adebajo? Yes, he also mentioned these things. So FX is major. And who controls FX? It is federal government. Federal government controls FX. Who controls inflation? It is federal government. Now, this administration came in 2023. Number of poor people were just 104 million. By 2024, it has risen to 129 million. So what are we saying? It's not about politicizing the administration. It is the numbers. So we shouldn't be mingling emotions with numbers. Now, we are talking about Coastal Road. Coastal Road is being built. We are asking, tell us, how much per kilometer do you plan for this project? They can't give us answers. They say they are not happy for the project. You can't do things that way. We have to be transparent. So the truth of the matter is that even this debt, the debt profile of the truth of the matter is that when it comes to debt, to me there's nothing wrong with in borrowing, but we've always been saying that what matters is what are we borrowing for? Are we borrowing to loot, or we are borrowing for productivity? Because as a matter of fact, Nigeria, in today's Nigeria now, our total factor productivity is negative. So meaning that this economy is not productive. In short, the only section of the country that is driving this economy is Lagos. If you take Lagos out of Nigeria, there's nothing else in Nigeria. So if you go and check GDP, how GDP is being contributed in Nigeria, Lagos contributes about 25%. The next state to Lagos is Rivers with 4%. The rest were just 1%, 3% contribute to the nation's GDP. Meaning that the growth we are having in Nigeria is not inclusive, and that is why economic grew by 3.something% in 2024. But at the same time, our capital income is declining. So now, even what about the electricity tariff? You know, electricity tariff is going to be, they're likely to increase that tariff now. Now, if the who controls the factors that changes tariff? Because I could remember vividly when Buhari was there, Buhari's ministers of finance, that's the Zainab, maybe I can't really remember her name, Zainab something. She said that they have successfully removed electricity subsidy. Now, these administrations came in, they broke everything into bad A, B, and C. They said some people must pay higher because the cost of the electricity is high. Now you ask yourself, who controls the variables that make the cost of electricity to go up? It is the federal government. If you go and check the NERC website, what are the factors that affect electricity generation? Exchange rate is there, inflation rate is there, gas price is there. So who is in charge of all these variables? It's federal government. Even though I must commend the administration that after they have removed subsidy, the revenue has increased. The revenue per GDP increased from 8% in 2020 to about 14% in 2024. But the truth of the matter is that revenue has increased, FAC has increased to the state government. But this money, all this allocation that has been increased has been eroded by high inflation. Because the truth of the matter is that the prices of things before 2023 is not longer the same thing. Many of them have gone double, tripled. So we mean that the money increase, the money that the state government are receiving is being eroded by inflation. So to me, the money, we shouldn't expect too much from the governors because the money they are receiving is being eroded by inflation, except we want to deceive ourselves. Then lastly, what I want to talk about. So people are saying that the state government should engage in this and that. See, the truth of the matter is that if any economy wants to create a shared prosperity for its people, it has to be driven by people, by private citizens, not government. Government, based on their antecedents, they are always filled with corruptions. So Nigeria as a whole, our institutions are very weak. So if we have institutions that are very weak, it will be very, very difficult for these institutions to be driving productions. So government should find a way to empower their people, let people drive these productions that are needed in every nook and crannies of the economy. Now, if you ask yourself, how many people have the capacity to even drive productions? It's just the small elite. Because it's only the small elite that have the capacity to drive productions. So government must find a way to make sure that it gives level playing field for everybody to engage. Because the America that we see today are built by the people. Government just formulate policies here and there, but the people are the ones doing the work. They are the ones challenging the productions. So I yield the mic here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hear you. I know we've sort of drifted away from the debt side, right? But let me just make a quick comment on the devaluation and also on the subsidies. Just remember, guys, if you do not devalue, you are saying that 1 naira or 500 naira is $1. That's what you're saying. That 500 naira is $1. So what do you think will happen? Simple. A government guy will apply for a loan of $1 million, bring it to the black market, sell it for 1,500 and make 1,000 naira per dollar, which is what was happening in the past. Because the real exchange rate you see today, the black market is the real exchange rate, not what CBN gives you. The black market is the real exchange, which is when I mean the black market, the interplay of demand and supply is the real rate. So your naira is not weak or strong. The market is saying it is weak. You can't fight the market. If you don't want a weak naira, export more. The more you export, then your naira will gain value. You can't say, I want strong naira.
You know that our production capacity is very low.
Then fix the production capability. You can't wish. It's like saying in Nigeria, better suit the money kill them. You can't say you want strong naira with no power supply to manufacture cocoa butter and
you have to fix some of these structural problems first. So if you don't fix our structural problems, then the valuation might just because
but hold up.
The valuation has increased.
Yeah, but hold up. Let's look at it this way. If you say first, if you don't fix the devaluation, you are losing more money through theft of the dollar. Because this will continue. If you don't stop the devaluation, what you are saying is that you are going to allow people to just go to the CBN, say they want to import essential commodities, get dollar at 500, turn around and sell it at 1,005. That's all you're doing. So you can do both. You can chew gum at work at the same time. You can devalue and you can say you want to fix the production economy. The problem in Nigeria, we've had a lot of space and I said this. The problem is that it's too expensive to manufacture anything in Nigeria. It's cheaper to go to India, buy rice, put on a ship, pay freight, pay insurance, bring that rice to the port in Lagos, than to grow rice in Kebbi and transport to Lagos. It's cheaper. And if you have an economy like that, you can't progress. If it was cheap to make things in Nigeria, inflation will fall. But imports are cheaper, which is why people go for imports. Imports are cheaper. And that's the problem with the economy. If you have an economy where imports are, America can afford cheaper imports because their dollar is quote-unquote strong. But your naira is weak and you are importing. Double whammy. Oluwole, go ahead. Oluwole, you've already spoken, right? Let's get Achiever. Achiever.sui. Go ahead, sir. I've got your Achiever. Go for it.
Yeah, okay, Jim, everyone.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't know you.
I can hear you.
Okay, good, I'm fine. Okay, good, I'm fine. Now, I think what the economist was actually saying earlier is about the fact that the government has to actually work on these things actually, I believe, work from the base level, right? you need, from our perspective, right, I think the things in which we are talking about, right, is just from the top. I think we have to work firstly on the first things that actually matters. Trust me, I think I tagged Carlo to one thing, I think, or last tweet, I think earlier last week or something, right? Now, the funny thing there is most, or should I say, most normal Nigerians can't even get access to good or adequate electricity, right? And we know how important electricity actually contributes to productivity. Right. Now, if the average Nigerian that is supposed to probably have a great idea, right, you're trying to build from the scratch or something like that, if you don't have access to this normal daily, or should I say consistent electricity, there is no way he or she will be able to build to its highest potential, right? And I believe if we're actually going to be talking about productivity or import or exporting in the highest levels, right, I think it's the groundwork system that just actually matters to me. Right, and this is me talking about from my own perspective, because these are the things we, the youth or the young guys that are not even elite, right? The guys that are trying to build and actually come to these spaces to learn one or two of what's really happening in Nigeria. How can we lock in? How can we actually position ourselves? What are the next new thing, right? What is really happening, right? So that's just it from my perspective, not sincerely. I think the government needs to just work on these things first. Right, let's get electricity. Let's get the basic things sorted out, please, before we even talk about productivity. Because if the basic things are sorted out, trust me, the productivity is going to spike.
So just I know there's no right answer, so I'm not putting you on the spot. But if you had $1 billion, would you do power or would you do a road to Calabar?
I'm going to do power.
Power first, okay. Again, there's no wrong answer. I just want to get your view on that. All right, perfect. Actually, I appreciate that, sir. And Mr. Henna. Hi, welcome to us, Mr. Henna. How you doing?
The borrower is a slave to the lender. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7. Mm-hmm. Is Nigeria entering a debt trap? I would call it a sinkhole, not a debt trap. I see it more of as inferiority complex, because we depend on the Bretton Woods Institutes. They tell us jump this way, you jump that way. So there's no homegrown economic outlook. There's no underpinning for the decisions they made. During the Davos World Economic Forum conference that was held in Abuja during Jonathan, while speaking on TV, I heard him say, the traffic for the airport was too much. Minister of Transport or Aviation, let's start building a second railway, a second runway for the Abuja airport. What did that tell me? That told me that there was no processes to the decisions that they make. And every decision you make has political, environmental, human and financial implication. So the decisions are abrupt, not data-based. So on the Lagos, I would just say, what underpinning, what data gave birth to that? Just a question. Those who do not know the purpose of pain, they can never put wealth to best use, and never aim for the limelight until you can light up the world. What do I say? Albert Einstein said you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. They are innovative funding strategies to developing an economy, to building iconic projects. They've done it globally and locally. Egypt built the Suez Canal extension, 73 kilometers. It was worth $8.5 billion. Egypt looked inwards. So I'm saying borrowing is actually inferiority complex. Borrowing is you not understanding the gambit of development. Because if China grew our economy by our GDP from 1978 to 2013 by over 100%, by what you call total factor productivity, and you go to China to borrow money, not to learn what total factor productivity underpins, my brothers and sisters, we can't help you. Second, to the projects, it's not just pushing on projects. The cost of delays to projects are actually higher than the cost of the projects themselves. Because when they started that East-West Road and they tweeted it away from Julius Berger and ported it to Cetraco, I smiled. Because if you look at inflation, and the major cost of project is mobilization. So when you mobilize people to sites, you demobilize them. You mobilize them to sites, you demobilize them. Even the cost of congestions, the cost of traffic, construction-induced traffic for those projects is higher than the projects. So there's a lack of holistic project outlooks in Africa. We look at cost only on a monetary basis. We don't look at it on the other productive centers like congestion, like mobilization, like cost of delays. Now let's go to debt. 2024, your debt servicing was 13 trillion. It rose by 68% from the previous year. I'll just say take note of that. And the debt issue is not just local. I'll say the debt is global. Because when Greece wanted to join EU to adopt the euro in 1999, when it was ushered, EU refused to allow Greece because their debt to GDP ratio, which was the threshold and the conditionality to adopt the euro, their debt to GDP ratio was above 60%. So debt gives a wrong signal. Cost of borrowing goes up when you keep borrowing. The conditionalities are attached to your borrowing sequences, which affect your balance of trade. Your cost of borrowing proves to me, and your passion for borrowing proves to me that you lack innovation, because there are innovative strategies like sensitization and many others we cannot count on. Your competitiveness drops, and the weakness to the effectiveness of your policies. But I will say this of the current president: a broken clock is right twice a day. One, is obsessed with Lagos. I give that to him, because if the other state governors were as obsessed with the way he's obsessed with Lagos, Nigeria will not be where it is. Two, he's a good student of history. What do I mean? He learned from the best. PDP. I'll leave that part for posterity. What is the way forward? Children win elections. Great minds transform countries. Lee Kuan Yew transformed Singapore from a third world economy, $400 per GDP per capita in 1960, today to a first world economy, GDP per capita of $93,000. Norway has proven to us before our face an oil and gas country, an economy like us. In 1967, they set up the Government Pension Fund Global, or you might call it the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Why? They had a collective outlook. They underpinned it on an innovative strategy for the common good of their people. They didn't just follow the bandwagon. Because if you go to Norway, brothers and sisters, there are no skyscrapers in Norway. There are no bogus projects. No, it's a simple country, no high rises, no big museums, no major theaters, no international conference centers, because they know all that has no impact on the economy. They focused on doing best what was needed to be done. They put their best foot forward. What did they do? They set up the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. They tilted their crude oil earnings. They defied the crude oil costs, because the resource costs. Because while the other resource cost countries are dipping in debt, Nigeria today 144 trillion. They're about to borrow 21 billion. He that goes a borrowing will go a soaring. But Norway has today built their sovereign wealth fund to 1.7 trillion United States dollars. In conclusion, I see intellectual inferiority complex. I see lack of innovativeness. And like Albert Einstein said, you are either part of the problem or part of the solution. And you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. Going forward, Nigeria is a business. Royal Niger Company, read your history. So what does Nigeria need today to remove this borrowing spree to a developmental spree? Nigeria needs a business-savvy visionary leader who understands geopolitics, economic undercurrents, and feels the pulse of the people. May God bless Nigeria with a righteous leader. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. But don't run away too fast, please. I mean, I like the fact that you talked about that Tinubu wants to develop Lagos. That's the point I tried to make with the fact that the road has been built. In the end, the road has been built. What did Goodluck Jonathan built in the Delta? What did Obasanjo build in Ogun State? Even Buhari, what did he build in Katsina? I mean, I get it. I'm just going there. I'm going there because if everyone has built his own community, built a terrain, by now would have had more things done in Nigeria. I get that part about him. I'm not mad at him. I'm more concerned with getting that road built. But let's come back to that. You say we should not borrow. For now, even China, when they had the heroin crisis, they borrowed, right? Right now, are you saying that we can achieve what we want to achieve in terms of infrastructure without borrowing? Can you give us a pathway? If you want to build, let's say this road now, how can we do without borrowing? If you could, please.
The big question is first, like I said, during the World Economic Forum that was held during Jonathan in 2014-15, I noticed something, that Jonathan was taking decisions arbitrarily, which means people, investors, look at your leaders. So just like when I listen to anybody speaking, I'm thinking, what is the foundation and the underpinning upon which they're taking this decision? Was it a business case? That's why I say Nigeria is a business-savvy leader that understands geopolitics, economic undercurrents, and feels the pulse of the people. So by Jonathan just saying, because there's a need, let us put a second runway. When I know that the Heathrow runway in the UK is running at 99.9% capacity, how many planes land in the whole of Africa? That you will say you need a second runway. So I already see the thinking. The thinking is not optimization. The thinking is hocus pocus. So let's spend the money. Two, the beauty of infrastructure is not to borrow money. We're using infrastructure to borrow money. Infrastructure first, like roads, is the largest and most visible asset of government. This is how people know there's a government. Section 14, subsection 2B, Nigeria's 1999 Constitution says, the security and the welfare of the people shall be the primary concern of government. So how do you give people optics of government? Infrastructure is what they can see first. And if your underpinning for infrastructure just as a means to borrow money, that's not the intent for infrastructure. We can use infrastructure to adopt technology. So I'm saying the underpinning for some projects, I will not talk about that project because I don't know the underpinning. Like you know, and you've said in this space, airports. Hocus pocus, no fundamentals, no economic undercurrents, no pause for the people. You just go, borrow money, build a project without putting it in place. Now, by God's grace, I'm an infrastructure specialist. How do you fund this project? Let me answer your question, Carlo. Egypt built, France tried to build the Suez Canal. They tried for years, it collapsed after wasting money. It was in 1897, they now finally managed, after people have died, it was a failed project, they commissioned it. Now, when General Assisi, the current president, was about to do the extension, the original length was 196 kilometers. Now, I wanted to add about half of that size, 73%. One of the 73 kilometers, one of the major issues they had then was funding it. The funding came from external. But now, what did Egypt do? Egypt was innovative. 73 kilometers extension, Suez Canal, a global project that cuts across the ocean and reduces navigational distance, is an economic game changer. Now they wanted to extend it. What did they do? One, they thought inwards. Two, they were innovative, which means they were not inferior. The money is in Nigeria, brother. MMM, they will still scam people. These CBEX they just did, they're still scamming people. That's why I say Nigeria needs a business visionary leader. Because except the people see that you understand the numbers and that you have a business case, they will not invest in it. How did Egypt raise the $8.5 billion on oversubscribed? They begged people to stop bringing money. The world was surprised. The whole world, when the project was commissioned, it put all their warships. The whole country was watching. The whole world, CNN was beaming. That was a novel project. How? They thought inwards. They funded it from within. They sold dollar certificates to their citizens. They bought into it as an investment. Norway is not high-minded. I just go to Canada, go to Toronto. I just go to New York. I see skyscrapers. And so what's my business? Norway said, no, I will not do follow. I will not do mob thinking. I will think out of the park. I will not just say because I have money for crude oil. Let me build the International Conference Center. Let me build a national theater. Let me build this. Let me build. The money is going to non-service sector of the economy. Because there are sectors of the economy. If you build, for example, every 1 billion spent on highways, you generate about 13,000 jobs. So let's look at all the sectors. How much would you fund into these sectors that will spin the economy most? So Norway did not join the bandwagon. Norway said, I will save my money. I will bring this money. Let's say that money for Lagos. Let me give you an example. That Lagos Calabar road. If I have that money in my hands now as president, I have 10 trillion. I will look, and I complete the project in 10 years. You say no. I will look overseas. Can I fund a toll road in Canada? And I will double that money in 3 years and bring back that investment to fund money in Nigeria. That's what the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has done. Today, they are worth 1.78 trillion. That's what the Canadian Pension Fund has done. Today, go check their worth. So we're looking outward to borrow, inwards to pressure ourselves. When we're supposed to look inwards to be innovative, outward to make profits. I must not fund projects in Nigeria. If the project will be more profitable in Libya, if the project will be more profitable in Syria, if the project will be more profitable in Switzerland, I will take Nigeria's money and invest the national There's the NSIA, the investment, external investment arm. I will invest the money there, get a high return, it's dollarized, it's hedged against the currency falling. Even if the currency falls to 3,000, I will do that instead of to go borrow in dollar, build the road. I do not complete it in 30 years like the second Niger bridge. The dollar price goes up, the gap to fund the debt servicing increases. Everybody's facing ourselves. Hocus pocus. Thank you.
Thank you. I must admit, I think everyone would have gained a thing or two. So essentially, instead of taking $1 billion to invest in Nigeria, take $1 billion, invest, yield a return. Even if you get 4% return, that's going to be $40 million. In 10 years, you still have your principal back. Use the $40 million and start the road. You have your $1 billion. You have the road funding. 2 to beat 1, more or less. Well, it's an idea, and I think I see some sense in it, and I think it's also something we can also do. The point is, local direct investment is also not being positioned as a potential revenue source. Local investment. We're looking at the foreign direct investment. This road that we're talking about can be built and funded locally. I also agree with Eda. It can be built and funded locally. Like we've said, design the road, divide that road into per kilometer mile. You will have folks that are abroad who say, I and my school folks were going to do this 1 kilometer. You still pay to the construction company. But break that road down. Let states, local government that want to fund. If Bayelsa has the money, let them fund theirs. If Rivers have the money, let them fund theirs. Let's move on. Ahmed, thanks for hanging in there. Ahmed, you know how you doing, sir? Ahmed, thanks for joining us. I'm talking about the debt trap. Yeah. We're talking about Nigeria is borrowing. One about 45 trillion. We have no list of projects. We're already indebted. Debt to revenue is very, very low. What's your take on this?
All right, thank you very much for having me. I think the real question should not even be if we're entering a debt trap. I believe we're already in a debt trap. The real question is, how do we get out of it? I think since, during Obasanjo's regime, when we were able to settle all our debts, I think it just took us about a year or two before we started borrowing, and then it just spiraled out of control, and then we are where we are right now. Now, if you look at it, yes, you look at our revenue to debt service, I think Tinubu was able to bring it down to about 65% as of last quarter of 2024. And then our debt to GDP ratio, still 56%, though the debt management office are still arguing that we have the best. Now, my argument is this, and as you have rightly pointed out, and so many people have rightly pointed out, is what are we borrowing for, right? We just, I think, settled the COVID-19 debt that was given to us by World Bank. But if you look at it, you can't see any visible impact. What was this money used for in the first place that we even paid back? You can't see anything visible on the ground to say, okay, this is what the money was used for in the first place. And my thinking is that unless you are America or Europe, you cannot borrow yourself to prosperity. As the last speaker rightly said, we really, really, really have to think inwards, right? And the funniest thing is with Nigeria's economy is the more you see, the less you understand. We have floated the naira, we have removed subsidy, revenue has increased, but yet people are telling us that, look, you still have to borrow more. And I thought the real reason, one of the main reasons was so that there will be enough money to go around. And then we don't need this debt, this borrowing that we're doing up and down. And at the end of the day, we go and borrow $2 billion. We borrow $10 billion. And at the end of the day, we don't even know what we're using it for. And you have to pay this debt. And, this Bretton Woods institution are not helping us. When they say jump, the only thing we ask is, how high do you want me to jump? And in my own view is, whatever they do to you, whatever advice they give you, it's to their own advantage. They think of themselves first, because you collect dollars from them, something that they just print, and when you're going to pay back, you have to sell something to them. Not necessarily directly to them, but it's your resources that you are selling because they would accept your naira. So I think it's something that we really, really need to leave inside. I believe we're already in a debt trap because how do you get out of this? We are talking about 145 trillion, right? So what do we need to do now? You need a lot of work for you to pay that money back. One way or the other, you have to pay it. So you have already mortgaged your own future, whatever you're going to get, maybe in the next 10, 15 years, it doesn't even belong to you. You just have to be managing. So, in summation, what I would like to say is, as you properly pointed out, we need to, the government, whoever is in the government, it doesn't matter which party, we have to hold them to account that, okay, what are you doing with all this money that you are collecting? You cannot be borrowing and just mortgaging the future of Nigerians because you just feel you can do it, or the World Bank says you should do it, or IMF says you should do it. But for me, we are already in the debt trap. It's just how